Hey guys, welcome to part 6 of What If Naruto Became the Surgeon of Death. If you enjoyed the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 11, The Horrific Truth. Naruto waited patiently in the Uchiha section of the village as he waited for one Sasuke Uchiha to arrive home. He had given the young man the deadline of the end of the Chunin exams to deliver him his payment for the return of his testicles, and the exams had officially ended. So here he waited for him to return. But he had not been idle this entire time, since he had sent crows to deliver two packages, with one being sent to Choji while the other had been sent to Shino. They had been a part of the group that bullied him in his youth, so they were part of his vendetta as well, and he had not forgotten about them. He smirked as he thought on how he got back at them, since the manner he did so was so perfect, as it was tailored for each person to ruin their lives as they had ruined his childhood without remorse. For Shino, he had a rigged box full of a chemical he concocted that was poisonous to bugs alone while leaving the humans alive. He had made it for a man with a serious bug infestation within his house. It had taken quite a bit to get the batch perfectly fine-tuned for actual use, but it would be worth it in the end. Now the kicker to this poison that he whipped up was that it soaked into a person's skin down to the bone and stayed there, so any attempts to implant more bugs would be met with failure, since they would die being on him alone, and even more so if they were inside him. Shino would be outed from his clan for sure after that happened, since their clan used bug-related jutsu, and not having the ability to do so would just make him the black sheep of the family to the point of being disowned. With Choji, he had something else planned for him that would more than likely have the same end result. It was a cursed pie that Naruto had bought from a very strange old woman who likes to curse people for just about any damn reason. The only reason she didn't curse Naruto, who was there in the first place, seeking a certain herb for some research, was that he cured her blindness and gave her new eyes so to see once more. In hindsight, he had no idea whether that was a good thing or a bad thing given her actions, but it saved his ass from being cursed, so he wouldn't really think about the repercussions. He had actually contemplated killing her to spare others in the future, but to be honest, he thought about it from a different perspective and realized she only ever cursed people who trespassed onto her land, so it wasn't she was hunting people down to curse, so it wasn't really fair to kill her for doing that. So as a means of payment, since she had nothing of monetary value, given her state of living like a hermit, he asked for a curse that he could give to another instead. She had cackled like a typical evil witch from stories and told him that such a thing was easily made. So he asked for a pie that cursed whoever ate it to lose weight too fast that they had to eat so much to not starve from it. The woman had made him such a pie, which he then froze for later use, which he had heated up and delivered to Choji in the hospital along with a get well card, so he didn't get suspicious. The boy was in the hospital recovering from having a puppet explode in his face, so it was common to see people wishing him well on his road to recovery. His crow had watched as the boy ate the whole pie by himself and flew off to relay the information to Naruto, who simply laughed since the boy was an idiot as well as a glutton. Thankfully, he didn't have to wait there for too long, since Sasuke eventually showed up at his house. Naruto mentally chuckled since he had actually guessed which one Sasuke had lived in, since he had no idea where he lived exactly in this area. The place was large with many houses that were now empty, since the Uchiha that once lived in them had been killed by the man he himself had killed before he harvested his eyes. He wondered if the spirits of the Uchiha could sense this, and if they did, he wondered how they felt on the situation. Would they be happy that he had avenged them personally, or would they be pissed that Sasuke hadn't done it himself, given it was his duty as the sole survivor of the clan to avenge them? Either way, it didn't matter to him since he didn't really care. "Hello there, Sasuke," said Naruto as he stood there leaning against the wall next to the front door. Sasuke dropped the groceries he had in his hand, since Naruto being here meant he had come for the money Sasuke owed him. "I have come to collect what you owe me. So I will ask you if you have my money." I. I'm sorry," stuttered Sasuke, since the memory of Naruto's threat came flashing back to his mind all of a sudden, and dear Kami, it horrified him to picture it alone. "I have been so busy I haven't had the chance to get it all collected. Please just give me a bit more time and I will get it for you. It was an honest mistake, I swear." Oh, said Naruto with a smile as he opened his pocket watch and looked at the time for a bit before he closed the thing and put it back into his pocket. Well, if it was an honest mistake, then no harm or foul. Just pay me in the next day, or so, and everything will be fine. Naruto then walked by Sasuke, but not before slightly slapping his cheek a couple of times as he walked by. Sasuke finally took a deep breath as Naruto walked past, since he was truly scared that Naruto would do something painful to him for not having the money that was owed as agreed. Wait a sec, said Naruto as he stopped a few yards from where Sasuke was still standing in an attempt to calm himself down. Before I go, I have a quick question for you. Sasuke then felt pain like he had never felt before as his leg bent in a way that it was not supposed to go, thus breaking it with the bone inside being visible the way it was bent. Naruto had put some blood in his palm as he had slapped Sasuke like he had, thus being able to do this to the fucker without realizing it. Does that hurt? Said Naruto with a sinister smirk on his face as he turned fully around to talk to him. Yes, shouted Sasuke in pain as he wanted to do something, anything really, to put his leg back in place, but his body would not listen to him for some reason. Why are you doing this? I will pay you your money. Oh, I believe that you will, said Naruto in a calm, yet still chilling voice, and usually I have more lenience for payment with people since things happen. But I gave you a very clear time of payment, and I have no patience for you of all people. What have I done to you? Sasuke screamed, but his screams only amplified as Naruto repeated the process with his other leg this time. What did you do? Asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Sasuke, did you think I would forget what you did to me after all these years? Look what I have done to everyone in your old group. I cut Kiba's limbs off with no means to be healed, Naruto is poisoned in a way, she will never recover, and so on. Then there is you. The person I hated third of all out of all of them. Kiba was my fourth hated person, and you saw how that worked out for him clear as day. Sasuke audibly gulped as Naruto got closer to him. It wasn't like he could crawl away with his legs being fucked up like they were and his body stiff due to Naruto controlling his blood. You remember that day I'm talking about, right, Sasuke? Said Naruto with a glare. The day when you unlocked your fucking Sharingan. You were so proud about it, but you just had to see with your own eyes just how powerful they were and used me for a test subject. You so happily used them on me with the order to take a sharp broken piece of glass to slit my own throat. But for reasons even, I don't understand, most likely being a strong will to live, I broke free of your hypnosis and lived past that day. You tried to end my life for a test, and that alone is enough to solidify my hatred for you. But oh no. It only gets worse from there. At this point, Sasuke had literally pissed himself in fear since he could feel the rage coming off of Naruto as he was so close to him. If Naruto wanted, he could strangle him, he was so close. After 9 long years away from this hellhole I was born into, said Naruto as he held out his hands to emphasize the point that he was speaking about the village as a whole, which I grew stronger and became as I am, by pure chance I met you again. It was not planned, but pure coincidence that we met again that day in Wave. But out of all the horrible things I could have heard from you, you just had to state the worst of the worst. It was at this point that Naruto's eyes changed into the Mangekyo Sharingan as he picked Sasuke up by the throat and began to squeeze hard enough to the point that Sasuke could breathe, if only barely, if his gasps were anything to go on. You had the audacity to threaten my girlfriend with rape, said Naruto with eyes filled with hatred beyond measure. He had very few people he could call true friends, and he would defend them to the end if need be, with his massacre of the shinobi of Kiri being a clear indication of that. But oh no. You also had to state that you would drag her back here, where you would have a member of the Yamanaka alter her memories and then forcibly impregnate her so as to carry your bastard children. Is there any low you will not sink to? And you have the nerve to claim to be an elite clan member when you have attempted such atrocities before you even reached the age of 18. Naruto then threw Sasuke, and when I say throw, it was with enough power in the throw so that he not only soared through the air, but went through several of the walls in his house before he came to a halt as he hit the last one too soft to break through. Sasuke was coughing lots of blood at this point, and his heart was beating so fast out of fear of what was going to happen to him now. Naruto simply appeared in front of him with his glare still there, but he was sitting cross-legged in front of Sasuke, who was too weak to move as the blood pooled from his head downwards. But you see, said Naruto as he took a deep breath, against all odds, I have the tiniest shred of patience with you still. So here is how this going to play out, Mr. Elite. Naruto pulled out a bottle containing an orange liquid of sorts. This was a concoction he made that drastically sped up the production of blood when dangerously low. His bloodline made him reach that point a few times, so it was always a good thing to be prepared for such an event. Naruto could clearly see that Sasuke was bleeding too much, and would not really live long if he didn't drink this. First thing you are going to do is drink this, said Naruto as he pointed at the bottle. It's not poison but medicine to replenish the blood you lost. Then I will heal your legs, not out of friendship or kindness of any sort, since you are the last person on this planet I would call a friend. You can't collect the money you owe me if you can't walk. Naruto then pulled out his pocket watch and saw that it was about noon. He then closed it and put it back into his pocket. It is noon now, said Naruto as he stood up and clenched his fingers inward. Sasuke groaned in pain as he felt the wires that Naruto used pick him up off the ground. He then screamed as the wire pulled his legs back into place before Naruto used his blood inside Sasuke to heal the things back to the way they were. But there was a clear scar there to show what had happened, and Naruto made no attempt to get rid of the scar since he wanted Sasuke to remember what happened here for years to come. Naruto then picked up the bottle and pinched Sasuke's nose, so he was forced to open wide. He then poured the medicine down his throat, which Sasuke had to admit was not as bad tasting as he had thought it would be like medicine usually was. The reason behind that was the multiple citrus fruits he put into it since it naturally helped heal from blood loss. So you have till 5 to get the money you owe me. And if you fail to do so this time, I won't do as I said before with the horrifically painful sex change, no. I'll do far worse, Sasuke. I'll kill you. But it won't be quick. I'll peel you apart layer by layer in a manner you won't die yet you will still feel everything. I'll make you watch via a mirror as I do it, and the last thing you will see before your end will be me holding your still beating heart as I crush the tainted thing in my hand after ripping it out through your exposed ribcage. Sasuke was terrified to the point of having a near heart attack as he heard this. The visions in his head were horrific enough, and he didn't even want to know what actually experiencing it would be like. So my advice to you, Uchiha, said Naruto as he whipped his hand around a bit, thus releasing Sasuke from the wires he was bound by a second ago. Run. Sasuke heeded his single word of advice and took off in a full-on sprint towards the bank as Naruto could only chuckle. Sasuke might talk a big game, but he sorely lacked the skills to pay said bills. And now that he was done here finally, albeit he did have to return to get his money, he left through his door to finish up 2 other things he needed to be done. The first place he went to was Ame itself, where he met with a bit of hostility. It wasn't Nagato or Konan who showed it, but the shinobi that made up the place. Nagato was their leader and thus had a duty to protect him as was their duty. It was only by Nagato's intervention via the use of one of his paths that they stood down since they finally accepted that he was not here to attack their leader. Naruto followed the path to where Nagato was and told him that his body was done. It surprised him that it was done sooner than expected, but the research he did in the genetics of the Uzumaki he took from him showed that they healed faster than most people. He wasn't sure how that helped in the process of cloning, but to be honest, he had nothing else to go on and he would have to spend months if not years, researching to see if that was the case and he had so much on his plate as it was. So Naruto waved for the 2 of them to follow him through the door into his operating room, none of them noticing the glare of a masked man in the shadows who had overheard all that was transpiring right now. The process was simple enough, with Nagato's new body strapped down since it was better to be certain it didn't wiggle around too much than not be prepared for it. So with a quick room in shambles, Nagato was now in a body that he once had when he was in his prime, without the need for the life support device he had been in for years. Konan was utterly speechless, since even though she had seen his power firsthand when he demonstrated it the first time, it was still hard to believe that he was able to heal Nagato as he had. With their business now concluded, Nagato shook Naruto's hand in thanks before he left with Konan out the door back to their hideout. Naruto did warn him one final time as he left that if he continued down the path he had initially planned, then his advanced healing process would be for nothing, since even he could not cure death, nor would he ever attempt to since he was neither a god or some sort of necromancer. He had no delusions of playing God and he would remain that way. Whether Nagato headed his words though, only time would tell. But Naruto honestly hoped he stopped his plan, since otherwise he would have to kill the man who would come after not only himself since he was the container of the Kyuubi now, albeit temporarily, but two of his friends with one of them, being his girlfriend meant, he would kill the man if he dared to try and extract the beast from her since the process was fatal. Once Naruto was done with his business with Nagato, he took a little while to brew some tea, which helped him to relax as well as lit a cigarette since he needed to be as calm as ever for what was going to happen next. Once the tea had been drunk, and the smoke enjoyed fully, he made another door to retrieve one of two people he needed to talk to. Naruto had felt angry with himself as well as stupid over the fact he had been so oblivious to the love of Kurashige of all people had for him. But his mind was usually filled with medicine and surgery, so he was oblivious to nearly everything else at the most random of times. Even with what brain power that wasn't used to develop new methods of healing, his desire for revenge had taken up the rest. But with most of those he wanted revenge against having suffered just that, he was now capable of thinking more clearly since he was not currently doing research. It was the fact that Kurashige had made a bet of all things with Haku over the rights of his love that solidified this knowledge. He truly did not know what to do here, since as a doctor, he loved to help people as well as heal, and the emotional pain of a broken heart was something he was all too familiar with. Sure, his version of it wasn't due to the loss of a lover, but his only living solace, which hurt just as bad to the extremes of contemplating suicide in his youth. He overcame such emotions, and lived on, but he had at one point reached that sort of low in his willpower. So he met Kurashige, who had read his note which basically stated he wanted to sit both girls and talk this through. So he used his door to take her to his home in spring, where Haku was waiting for them. To say the anger between them was thick would be a severe understatement. The two girls argued back and forth for about an hour, alone before Naruto even opened his mouth to say the first thing he would say in this conversation. He basically came out and stated he loved both of them, since Kurashige was the first true friend he had, and Haku was his first girlfriend. He admitted to being oblivion with Haku's obvious advances, being a key point in how severe it was, and as they were now with the rivalry going into the extremes to the point they were betting him like some sort of fucking prize made him demand they cease or he would simply cut ties with both of them. After he said his piece, he left the house to go and check up on Yuna. The silence that followed his departure was long as well as awkward since they were now both smacked with the reality of their selfishness. It was true they had bet Naruto in their fight without consulting him, and both women could understand where he was coming from since he did not like to make people sad. Well, unless it was out of revenge, but you would have to really piss him off to get to that point. So with the awkwardness done and out of the way, they started over and talked like adults instead of fighting like children. Naruto had returned outside his house after dropping off money for Yuna and checking his logbook to see what future appointments he had. He remained outside since he had no idea as to what was going to happen. He wondered if he had made a mistake doing this, but he wanted the bickering to end, mainly due to people in this world killed for such reasons like jealousy, and he didn't need one or the other murdering, since it would only cause him grief to hear they had died. Imagine his surprise when he walked inside the house and the two of them hugged him deeply with tears in their eyes and constant apologies coming out of their mouths. Naruto was honestly not expecting this, but he would take it and hugged them back since he was just happy that they weren't killing one another as he feared. But as Naruto had been busy doing the few errands he had leading up to this heartfelt moment, another person was about to suffer big time as a complete contrast of what Naruto was experiencing. Konoha, earlier that day. Kushina had sat at home in deep thought as she looked at the scroll Naruto had left her to deliver to Minato. Time seemed like it was passing by so slowly as she just sat there and stared at the thing. So many conflicting feelings were going through her mind and she honestly did not know how to cope with it. On one hand, she had a message from the man who basically poisoned her daughter with no hope of recovery. This side of her mind was screaming out to destroy the note since she owed the man nothing. But on the other side was the more curious side of her mind, the side that recognized a genetic blood seal of all things. This was the side that wanted answers to the main question of the relationship between Naruto and Minato. But the more her mind tipped towards the latter, the more fear that began to set in, since it opened up a whole new slew of questions she honestly didn't know if she even wanted to ask. But in the end, it was the more curious portion of her mind that won out. So she picked up the note, took a long deep breath and made her way to her husband's office to speak with him on the matter. Minato was busy doing his normal amount of paperwork as Kushina entered the office. He was too engrossed in the damned process to notice that Kushina set up a silencing seal on the door so that their conversation could not be heard by outsiders of any sort. No sense of things being heard and rumors being spread in the village that blew it far out of proportion. "Hello dear," said Minato as he signed off on the current scroll he had before he looked up at his wife. He saw her standing there, but he couldn't quite make out her emotions since for lack of a better word it was just blank. "Is something wrong?" "I was given this note to deliver to you," said Kushina emotionlessly as she stepped forward and handed to him. He took it from her hands and looked at it before he said anything. He just wanted to make sure it wasn't booby trapped or something like that, but there was nothing there but a simple wax seal. He didn't pay too much attention to the wax seal, though otherwise he would have seen the actual seal engraved into the thing. "Who sent this message?" said Minato since there was no indication as to who sent it. "Naruto did," said Kushina in the same emotionless tone she had before. "Said it was important and you needed to see it right away." Minato's eyes opened wide as he heard this and easily tore the seal off the scroll to get at the message within, oblivious to Kushina shaking in place. She was gritting her teeth as she suppressed her rage of his one single action that seemed like nothing to many, but she knew better. The fact that Minato was able to open the scroll after breaking the seal meant that he was related to Naruto, and now her fears of the truth were flooding outwards to the point she was near tears. But Minato was too interested in what message Naruto could have possibly sent him to notice her reactions right now. He was expecting some sort of gloating or threat of some sort, but all he saw was one-line words with a seal underneath it for storing something. This caused Minato's eyebrow to rise as he read what was written. "The family that spurned me since I was not the spawn of the monster they wished me to be." Minato looked at that first line and saw the seal that was below it. He wondered what he meant by that, since the statement was not only out of context, since there was no build-up to it or anything else to explain it, but was hard to grasp since it was so out of place, the way it was written. But seeing that there was a seal below the written text, he placed his finger on it and activated the thing. Out of the seal came a simple napkin, yet one that made Minato's eyes widen in shock so much. It was a well-known fact within Fire Country that the former Kind family was as vain as they were greedy. Pretty much everything they owned had their family crest on it somewhere, and from the rumors he heard, even their employees had it as well as a brand of some sort. So to see a napkin with their well-known crest on it spoke volumes, but not as much as a napkin that was blood-soaked as this was. Minato had wondered what had happened exactly to the Kind family, as did many people. They knew that there was a vast mob of people who robbed and slaughtered them all, but besides that there was nothing to point the blame to any specific person since the evidence was too. Well, there was just too much of it really to single people out. Now Minato saw this napkin and understood that Naruto himself had somehow been the person to orchestrate such a thing. He most likely learned of his family and took vengeance against the ones who cared not for him and wanted him to simply waste away. This did not bode well for Minato since if Naruto was willing to do such a thing against one of the most powerful of families in the Fire Country, he would have no qualms about coming for him personally. But the funny thing that Minato didn't know about that napkin was that, while Naruto had taken it as a souvenir of his plan going off without a hitch, the blood on it was not from the Kind family at all. It was his own, given the fact he had left the room as his former family was being killed, and only grabbed the napkin on the way out the door. He had dipped the thing in his blood to add shock value to the message it would send to Minato like it was now. But with the understanding of what the napkin symbolized out of the way, Minato saw that there was more to the message since the way it was designed was to show one part at a time so that he understood what each line truly meant in full. The madman who tried so hard to control death itself as a weapon to use against everyone from the shadows like the coward he was. The seal this time ejected a cracked root mask, something that made Minato feel his rage boil up more than it already was with his daughter in the hospital like she was. Minato had done extensive investigating as to what had happened to his hidden root forces, and with this single written sentence he now knew Naruto was to blame. He was not sure how that was, but given the fact that the boy had been able to eliminate every last squad of them, he had ordered Danzo to send out to capture him and bring him to Konoha to begin his re-education. It was not too much of a stretch to accept that he was capable of eliminating Root like he did. He had seen Danzo's body in a glass cage of all things, with his arm blown off and the cause of death being a bit of a confusing guess. Minato was unable to tell if it was due to the lack of blood from his lost limb or the lack of air, since the machine meant to pump it in was broken. He had gotten the information from another Root member as to what had happened, since the reason the glass box was constructed was to contain Naruto in a manner he could not escape, but he knew nothing about the events that took place that specific day, since the only ones to survive what Naruto had done were those not there that day entirely. The psycho who nearly took that which I cared for the most in this world. This seal ejected a single bloody, Bentai, one that bore the mark of the now liquidated Kiri. This caused Minato to fill in the gaps of what had happened, since the pieces were all there for him to see with his own eyes. He was just missing confirmation like this. The fact that the ice user Haku had the power of the three-tailed Biju, the very same one that the former Mizuka Jiagura himself used, only hit the nail on the head there. But the revelation only caused more questions than answers, since if Naruto had fought for the rebels like killing Yagura would state, why had they not won the war in the end? The battlefield showed the bodies of both sides, but there was obviously no clear winner, since the end result was the end of Kiri as a major village. These people all paid the price for angering me in one way or another, but you have gone beyond that. You forsook me, tried to erase me from existence to bury your secret, and then had the gall to forbid me from actually succeeding in life by denying me the chance to do it. Yet look at me now. I have become something that all who hear of me wish to have me settled down within their villages. You included. I find humor in the fact that you tried so hard to hinder my life and then tried so hard to control it when it became worth a damn. I warned you that day. You came to me, so sure that your plan to use a Yamanaka to force my loyalty to the village had succeeded, that I would see to it that all that you cared for was taken from you. That the world would know the truth of the monster you really were, and so far I am succeeding in my plan far better than you have. I have already taken your daughter from you in a way she will never recover from, since the poison I injected her with was specifically made so that she would never heal from it. She will suffer for every second of every minute of every day for the rest of her life, and there is no cure for it. This is how she made my life until the day I left this accursed place, and I returned the pain with 16 years worth of interest included. I have taken one out of the three things you care for the most from you, and I assure you that the second is not far behind. And soon enough, the third will be gone as well. Signed. Your forsaken son. Naruto. P.S. Just wanted you to know when you are gone. When you die by my hands. Your clan name will die with you, since I never was, nor will I ever be a Namikaze. I'm better than that. Minato growled in rage as he finished reading the message. How dare this brat threaten him like this? Insulting the very Namikaze clan name, the same one that instilled fear in most people who heard it due to what he himself had done to earn it such infamy in the last Shinobi War. Did he have any inkling as to who exactly he was challenging like this? It was only then that he looked up and saw Kushina standing there with her hands clenched into fists and glaring at him with so much hate as the tears poured out. When? Was all she was able to manage to say in the end. Her rage prevented her from saying more than that one single word, yet it spoke volumes. What are you talking about, Kushina? Asked Minato, who honestly didn't understand why she was like this. When did you go behind my back and cheat on me, you bastard? Demanded Kushina, this time her rage making her hair seem more alive to express herself better. I don't know what you are talking about, said Minato as he broke out with a bit of a cold sweat. He never thought that Kushina of all people would learn the truth, and he feared her anger since she was not one to pull punches when she was angry. Don't lie to me, shouted Kushina in rage, unable to contain it anymore. I swear I have no idea what you are talking about. That scroll, said Kushina as she pointed at the scroll he had just finished reading. The wax seal you tore off to open it. It was engraved with a seal. A very specific one that can only be opened by those with Naruto's genetics, and given the fact you are the older of the two of you paints a very clear picture. Minato's face lost all his color as he heard this, since he had not paid attention to the seal close enough to see it. To think that Naruto did something like that for a message. But then the line came back to his from the message. I have taken one out of the 3 things you care for the most from you, and I assure you that the second is not far behind. Now it made sense, since he sent Kushina with a scroll that proved he had been unfaithful given she was an Uzumaki and easily recognized various seals. That fucking brat had set him up. And now I will ask again, said Kushina as she literally threw the desk in front of her towards the wall, shattering it to splinters with the papers that had been on it flying just about everywhere. When did you cheat on me? Kushina, started Minato as he was trying to find a way out of this whole uncomfortable situation. Look, it was a fling I had before we dated. I didn't cheat on you. Do I look like an idiot? Demanded Kushina as she used her chakra chains to bind Minato in place. That boy is the same age as our daughter. So that meant you slept with another woman while we were still dating. You cheating bastard. Kushina then balled up her hand into a fist to slug her husband, but she stopped short of actually hitting him by a few inches. Minato was understandably flinching with his eyes closed since Kushina hit hard, but she never hit him. Right now her mind was essentially frozen as the truth dawned on her about Naruto. She had outright hated the boy for what he had done to Naruto, but now in this moment where her body was going overboard with rage, a moment of clarity was coming over her. She remembered what he had told her about his past during the Chunin exams, about how he had been abandoned by his father and the fact he had no name to speak of, so that if he had died no one would even remember him since his mother had passed before him. She could understand his rage towards those who had everything, trying to take absolutely everything from one who had nothing. The pain he must have gone through to be hurt by his own half-sister, a constant reminder of the fact he was not wanted by the man who spoke so much praises towards his daughter, but nothing about his own son. In that brief moment of clarity, she not only fully understood his reasons for doing as he did perfectly, but actually agreed with him fully. This caused her brain to stop as she had been about to hit Minato, but now she couldn't even bring herself to do that. So she let him go from his bindings and began to walk away from him as she wiped the tears from her eyes. To think she loved a man and had a family with one who was cold enough to forsake his own son of all people he had with another. It's bad enough to cheat on someone, but you must take responsibility for your actions, and Minato had not and left his own child to die out in the shadows. She would hate the man and everything about him, too, if she had lived that way. Kushina, said Minato, all the while scared about what was going to happen now. He had expected her to slug him hard, but she didn't, and that must at least be some sort of positive sign, right? I'm done, Minato, said Kushina plainly. I'm going home, packing my things and moving out. I'm leaving you. So I hope the sex was worth it back then, you fucking asshole, since it not only cost you your daughter, but your wife as well. She then ripped the seal off the door and slammed it behind her as she left the room, fully leaving Minato there alone. Usually in a case like this, after a man had lost so much in such a small amount of time, they would self-reflect on their choices and question just how they got to this point, but Minato was too vain and proud to do that. So you know what was going on in his head right now. Hatred for Naruto. Right now he was blaming Naruto for just about everything that was going bad in his life right now, and it was showing in his eyes that were easily being seen becoming clouded with madness. Things were going so well before that brat had undone everything. Why hadn't he done as he wanted and either killed him, or sent Danzo after him to make him a member of Root sooner? But now the boy had taken too much from him, as it were, and Minato was damned well sure he was going to make Naruto suffer for this. In the end, Naruto would know his place as one of his shinobi, even if he had to destroy everything the boy cared about down to the very last thing to instill the deepest of fears into the brat. 2 weeks later. Naruto was in a good mood today. He had helped out 2 different people change their lives recently in a positive way. The first being Neji himself, who was finally able to be placed into his new body and get out in the world once more. Neji had taken a bit to get used to his new look, though it wasn't all that different than what he was like before, just his eyes had changed. No longer were they ones with the clear signs of a Byakugan, being gray and pupilless. Now they were normal looking, yet still had all the normal abilities of the Byakugan. He had helped the man by asking him what he wanted to do with his life now. Surprisingly enough, Neji wanted to be a chef of all things, which made him chuckle a bit since Fu had dreamed of being the same thing. So Naruto introduced him to the same man who owned a restaurant that he had shown Fu a while back. The man who ran the place was a great teacher and showed Neji the ropes. While he still had plenty to learn, he was a natural at it and took to the lessons fast enough. But while Neji worked hard to achieve his newfound dream free from the shackles of servitude like he had been forced to endure most of his life, he surprisingly got closer to Fu on a more personal level. Naruto wasn't sure how it happened, mainly since Neji himself would lose his tongue on the fact that a girl was interested in him in the first place. He had always been a strict, no-nonsense kind of person, but now that he was no longer a branch member and therefore not being judged constantly, he could act better. Naruto was happy that Neji had found someone, and that his friend Fu was happy with Neji. But their relationship was their own business, and right now he had business elsewhere. It had been a while since he had visited any of the orphanages he had been funding, and he would love nothing more than to see the smiling faces of the little ones as he spent time with them. So he made a trip to town and bought sweets for the children since they loved it so much, and once he had it all packed up for transport, he made a door to head into before he made another to walk out next to one of the orphanages. He always appeared outside of it and never inside since he never wanted to frighten someone inside with a randomly appearing door. There was already one older boy spreading rumors of the place being haunted in one of the orphanages, and he was not going to throw fuel into that fire. But then he made a door to walk out and greet the children of the orphanage he picked, and it was in that moment that his good day was shattered beyond repair. The first thing he noticed as he opened the door was the smell of smoke, but it was laced with something else he couldn't quite place yet. But the second he opened the door fully, he began to understand what that smell was. What he saw was the entire building burnt to the ground, with nothing more than embers still there, showing that the fires had been done recently, but enough time had made the flames themselves die down. Naruto ran forward to see what had happened, hoping beyond hope that the children and the matriarch of the place were okay and that it had been a simple fire with little to no casualties. But as he got closer, his fears on the matter only increased since he now recognized the smell that was laced with the smoke. Burnt flesh. He had treated the wounds of many people who had suffered burns of all sorts before, so he was familiar with the smell. That wasn't a positive thing right now since it only painted a more gruesome picture in his mind. As he made his way through the rubble, he began to feel the tears well up in his eyes since he saw the charred bodies of the children who were always so happy when he came to visit. He saw the burnt remains of a teddy bear and picked it up. This bear he remembered he gave a little girl who was sad that her parents had been killed by bandits and feared just about everyone in life. Naruto had bought her this toy so as to help her feel a measure of safety in the world, and it worked since she was happier as time went on, but now her life had been snuffed out like her own parents and it caused a tear to fall from his eyes. He searched the remains of the place, but all he found were the remains of the people within. There were too many to count, thus showing that next to no one had escaped if any had at all. But the worst scene had yet to be discovered by him, since that happened when he had made it to the back of the place where the playground was located. It was here that Naruto fell to his knees in despair since the image was horrific to witness. There in the back were the corpses of the children who had made it out of the building. But these ones were not burned like the others. They all had one or multiple kunai and or shuriken in their backs. Whatever monster had done this had slaughtered these kids as they were running for their lives. Naruto cried heavily as he fell to his knees. The scene was too much to bear. But then a horrible thought came to his mind. If this was the fate that had befallen this orphanage, did the others suffer the same fate as well? Wasting no time, Naruto summoned a door to his operating room to go check. Right now he prayed to Kami herself that his fears were wrong. Spring Country, later that day. Yuno was on her way back to her place with her books on medical study in hand and a smile on her face. Life seemed good to her since she went from being an orphan on the streets to the assistant to a man who paid for her to not only survive, but had saved her life once more when she was kidnapped, as well as paid for her schooling and was giving her a better future than she was expecting years ago. So yeah, she was in a happy mood. But that happy mood stopped as she was down the street from her place and saw two men, wearing the dark clothes of a shinobi, lockpicking the front door. She simply stood there since she had no idea as to what she was supposed to do here. But one of the men saw her standing there and pulled out a kunai to end her since their orders were clear and there was to be no witnesses to what they were going to do. Yuna screamed and turned to run, but the man threw the kunai towards her. His aim had been accurate and would have hit its intended target, if it weren't for one thing happening right then. "Shambles," said Naruto as he used the power of his room to switch places with Yuna. The kunai pierced his chest deep, but he felt no pain nor did it go through any vital organs, so he would easily heal from this. He pulled the kunai out and then charged forward towards the man, who unsheathed his sword to defend himself, but Naruto threw the kunai he pulled out of him, still covered in his blood, and threw it into the man's leg. The man stopped out of pain for a brief second, and that second was all Naruto needed to grab the man by the face while he glared deep into his masked face. Counter shock. The area was lit up as the electrical power he conjured up to hurt this man sparked to life. Naruto wanted to kill this man, truly he did, since no one hurt Yuna or even attempted to and got away scot-free. But he needed the man alive to answer his questions. His partner tried to run away, but not before attempting to kill the other man with a kunai to silence him permanently. Yet Naruto saw this and stopped the kunai from hitting by switching the places of the man and the weapon with another shambles. When within grabbing range, he repeated the process of shocking the man into unconsciousness and told Yuna to head to his house now and to stay there until he said otherwise. Yuna trusted him fully and ran as fast as her young legs could carry her towards his house. Naruto dragged the two men into his office and then dropped them once inside. He opened their mouths and pulled out their tongues to see if these men had seals on their tongues as all root members did, and to his anger they did. He sat there and pondered on just what to do now. He could torture these men all he liked for information, but they would not give anything up due to that fucking seal. He needed answers, since whoever had burned down the orphanages would pay in full. And when he got his hands on said person, he would not make their death quick. He would continue to torture and then heal before repeating the process over and over again. He knew Danzo would be the kind of person to kill innocent people since he was a monster, yet he was dead since Naruto had killed him. Well, put him in a position that he could not escape as he bled suffocated to death, but that was semantics really. He thought hard on how to get the answers he sought, but what he needed more than anything else was a seal master the likes of the Uzumaki of old. Naruto groaned as he thought about that, since he knew of one Uzumaki who was proficient with seals, and after poisoning her daughter like he did, he highly doubted she would help him in any sense of the word. But he owed it to the orphans to try. So he summoned up a door and walked into it so as to go find the woman who would no doubt hate to see him now more than ever. Forest of Death. 1 hour later. Naruto was inside the forest, but not too far, and since he was waiting for someone to arrive hopefully. He had sent a crow, with a message for said person to meet with him, and he only hoped that she would come as he asked, since this was very important. And luckily for him, soon enough Kushina arrived as requested, albeit with a pissed look on her face. "You have some nerve not only coming here," said Kushina with a huff, since she was pissed. When she had seen the name on the scroll that had been delivered to her, she was at first inclined to rip it up. But something in the back of her mind told her to not do so, and in the end, it was that section of her mind that won the internal conflict. The message had been brief and asked for her to meet him in the Forest of Death since he needed her help with something. The message did not say what that something was, but if the same young man who knew she was pissed at him was asking for her aid by name, it must be important. She had been in the middle of packing all her stuff up since she could no longer live in this house since she planned to divorce Minato, so she had time on her hands. But asking to meet with me of all people is crossing the line. "I know," said Naruto sadly, which Kushina picked up on easily enough. Her motherly instincts kicked in for some reason and made her question just what had the young man in such a mood. He seemed so broken right now, and it was a stark contrast to the confident yet sadistic man she saw not too long ago during the exams. "And normally I would not ask for your help like this, since given the history between us. Yet you are the only seal master I know of, and I need your help with a seal that I can't break. And just why would I help you break a seal when you refuse to heal my daughter? That is a separate issue that I don't want to get into," said Naruto with a sigh. He knew she would bring that up at some point. "But this aid is not for me, but for the near 1,000 orphan children that have been slaughtered that I seek to avenge. What? Asked Kushina in shock since that was not what she was expecting to hear. I have been funding multiple orphanages all over the elemental continent, said Naruto simply, and recently I have learned that they had all been attacked with the children inside slaughtered with the building burning in around them. I wasn't able to save any of them since they were all already gone, but the same group, responsible for doing the deed, tried to kill a little girl I have been putting through school. I was able to save here alone, but the issue I am dealing with right now is the fact they have a fucking seal on their tongues that prevent them from saying who sent them. Seals on their tongues, said Kushina in thought as she heard about shinobi with them in the past. Like Danzo's root shinobi? Not like his root shinobi, corrected Naruto with a bit of a snarl. It wasn't aimed at her in the slightest, but at the fact that a shadowy organization that literally did so many horrific things to get their way was that he was so sure he had eliminated entirely was still around to do such horrific things still. They are root shinobi. If that is the case, said Kushina, since in her mind, it made sense who sent them since she knew Danzo was a monster and wouldn't be affected by such atrocities. Then you should already know who sent them. It's not that simple, pointed out Naruto, since I killed Danzo a while back. So now I need to know who sent these men when their leader has been dead for a while. Danzo is dead, asked Kushina in surprise. She always knew that the elderly man would die from his actions, but to hear it had actually happened was still shocking. Yes, said Naruto with a simple nod of his head, the same girl who I just saved. He had her kidnapped in a vain attempt to try and blackmail me into serving him. Basically threatening to kill her unless I did what he asked. His plan didn't work as expected though, since I flipped the script on him and ended not only his life, but what I assumed was his entire army. But apparently I missed some. Said Kushina in thought, since like Naruto, she was stumped as to who was running their group now that Danzo was dead. The man was stubborn as well as greedy, so he was not one to share power or just about anything at all now that she thought about it. He was the kind of person who would make it so his organization would not function without him, so there was no possibility of betrayal, so how is someone running his organization in his stead? So I am asking you to help me with this one thing only, said Naruto with a passive wave of his hand, not for me, but the children. I'll help you, said Kushina, but Naruto saw she was going to make stipulations to their agreement. Naruto knew exactly what she would ask, and so he cut her off before she could utter a single syllable of her stipulation. No, said Naruto harshly, but firmly. No what? Asked Kushina in confusion. I know you were going to demand that I healed Naruto in payment for your help, so I simply said no since I won't do it. Then I won't help you with the seals, said Kushina with authority in her voice. In her mind she had what Naruto needed most of all right now, and she would use this information as leverage to get him to heal her. Fine then, said Naruto as he summoned up a door and began to walk towards it. I'll just have to find another seal master that will. Wait! Shouted Kushina in shock that Naruto had basically foregone any sort of negotiations towards healing Naruto even though she had the skills he needed to the point he sought her out. Is your hatred for my daughter just so great that you would not bargain the thing you need the most for her health? Yes, said Naruto plain and simply as he stopped a few feet from his door. Why won't you heal her? Demanded Kushina, who was literally losing it at this point. As a mother she wanted her daughter healed so she could learn the mistakes of her past and become a better person for it. Why are you so stubborn? Stubborn? Asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow as he turned his head to look at Kushina from the side. Alright Kushina, you convinced me. I'll heal Naruto. Oh started Kushina before Naruto held up his hand to silence her gratitude towards him. I'll heal her if and only if you can tell me one time she genuinely showed kindness to anyone her own age that wasn't her group of clan heirs. And I'll know if you are lying, so go ahead and tell me. I'm all ears. Kushina was utterly speechless as she thought hard on what he had asked her to think about. She went years back to think of a moment where Naruto had been kind to someone, but it only just now dawned on her that she only hung around the other clan heirs. Hell, she even treated her own squad mate Sakura poorly now that she thought about it. And that is my point, said Naruto, you want me to heal a monster wearing human skin basically? But, said Kushina, but she was still too stumped to say much more. Your daughter got enjoyment from the suffering of others, said Naruto, with me being the first one she did it to. When I left she did the same to others like me in the sense that people had no idea they even existed in the first place. How do you know this? Asked Kushina in genuine concern. My hatred towards her became a bit obsessional over the years, said Naruto as an explanation, and so I learned enough about her over the years. She hurt 4 others who the village would not miss along with her friends. She felt no remorse for what she had done, and 3 of them committed suicide due to the pain. The 4th one they killed by injuring him so severely and leaving him there. His parents were too poor to afford the proper care for his injuries, so he died from internal bleeding in that alley. But she didn't care since they were nobodies in the eyes of the people. Kushina at this point was crying since she had no clue that her daughter was such a monster like Naruto said. While there was still a part of her mind that said that he was lying to her, the logical portion of her mind was telling her that he wasn't. He had basically told her about her own husband's faithlessness, so she was inclined to believe that his words rang true about her daughter. Apparently whatever monstrous tendencies he had were passed down to their daughter and it hurt to see the truth. So I don't care what you offer, said Naruto with a snarl, be it money, power, or some rare material the likes I have never seen before. I will never heal such a monster to continue her sick ways on another. So now that you know the truth on the matter, I will take my leave and seek help from another proficient enough in seals. Wait! Shouted Kushina once more as she wiped the tears from her eyes. What is it now? Said Naruto with a roll of his eyes, time is a bit of a factor here, and I need to find a seal master ASAP. I'll help you, said Kushina calmly. Really? Said Naruto with a raised eyebrow, since he genuinely did not expect this. He thought that Kushina would be in a bit of a funk when faced with the truth of just how monstrous her family really was. He had told her the truth about Naruto, so she would move past this given her daughter was a terrible person, and not worth all the tears when she caused an equal amount of pain to those who didn't deserve it. It had taken plenty of detective work, as well as the aid of his crows to find the files and such, but he was able to piece the puzzle together since he himself had suffered like their victims had, so he knew their methods as well as their tactics. Yes, said Kushina as she walked towards the door, but I'm not doing this for you. You basically killed my daughter, and I will never forgive you for that. I just want to make sure that whoever is responsible for the death of so many innocent children is not able to do it again. That is all I wanted, said Naruto as he opened the door for her, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry things played out the way they did. No parent should suffer like this, but when you make a habit of enjoying the misery of another, it never ends well. Kushina simply nodded since he spoke the truth on the matter, and then entered the door towards their destination. The next day, Naruto was sitting at his desk with a fat stack of scrolls piled on it. He was sitting there contemplating on what exactly to write as a message to the world. He was trying to compose himself, but it was hard with the things he had learned, with the rage behind it literally keeping him awake all night long. Haku had picked up on this easily, and left him alone since she was afraid of what he would do to her if he directed that amount of concentrated rage towards her. Kushina had been a massive help by making a counter to the seal on the root shinobi's tongues, and once it was off Naruto had gone to work to make them spill their secrets. The good thing about his abilities was he could hurt people past the realms of fatally and keep them alive as he did it. So after a few hours of breaking those men apart, both metaphorically as well as literally, he got the answers he sought. But the answers he got only increased his rage far more than he thought it would, and he made it known as he burned them alive slowly inside out as he roared in rage. Kushina was just as enraged as well as appalled by the truth, yet Naruto asked her to remain silent on the matter for a bit. He told her he had a plan to solve this problem, and Kushina agreed to it since she didn't want to deny him his revenge against the monster that sent the root shinobi. So now here he was staring at the open scroll with the right words coming to him as to what to write. He felt as though he was slowly losing himself to his rage, and yet when he almost completely lost himself to it in his mind, the memory of his mother appeared before him and held out a hand to pull him out. Naruto had cried but a single tear as her memory had saved him from losing himself to the anger, and with that his mind was clear, and he began to write the first of many message scrolls that would be sent out. To whoever ends up reading this scroll, and I say that on the account I have written many with the same message in full word for word, and sent them throughout the elemental nation, to let the truth be heard. My name is Naruto, or as many who have heard of me know me as the Surgeon of Death, the doctor with the ability to heal many a disease deemed incurable, as well as the skills to defend myself from those who try and force me to submit in various ways. As many know, since my name became well known, most if not all villages have been trying to recruit me within their ranks as one of their own, and I can see why, since having someone with my ability to heal things would be a valuable asset. But I have turned down all offers for such a thing, since I am in firm belief that medicine is a universal thing and all people are worth healing. Sure, I charge for it, but materials to heal others costs money, and I myself have to eat, so I do what I need to do. I am sending these scrolls to tell of an event that has happened that is horrendous to speak of, but the truth must be heard so the party involved does not get away with what they have done. I have been privately funding 14 separate orphanages all over the elemental countries, not out of some personal gain of any sort, but only because I myself am an orphan and know how it feels to have no one there and wish to aid the children so their lives were better than mine at that age. But now that is no longer a concern that I can help with. I recently went to one of the orphanages. I fund to check up on the children and to aid the sick if they need it, as I do from time to time, but when I got there, the orphanage was nothing more than charred wood that was still smoking as the fires had just died down. I grieved, since in the rubble was the burnt corpses of the children who I have helped. But what I quickly learned only made my grief turn to rage. In the backyard of the building were the bodies of children and a few adults who were the caretakers of the place. They did not die from the fire. They were murdered, with the kunai still in their backs, or the few unfortunate souls with cuts that bled out, or the one I saw that was decapitated fully. In fear, I quickly went to the other orphanages and saw again and again the same exact scene. Who could do such a thing to children? What monster orders the death of innocent civilians who have no allegiance to anyone, since they are simply trying to survive? I got my answer a day later, and it only made the situation far worse. I have taken it upon myself to aid one orphan personally in a manner that she has her own place and is currently in school as the top of her class. She wants to be a doctor as I am and is trying her hardest to achieve that goal. Two men, bearing the insignia of the organization known as Root, came to her place with the orders to end her life, but not because she was a threat of any sort. No, they were ordered to kill her, as the rest had been ordered to slaughter those orphan children to send a message to me. Luckily, I was there to save her life, but they had a seal on their tongues so as to not spill their mission orders or the identity of who sent them to do the deed. And while some of you may know the original Root leader known as Danzo Shimura, he has been dead for some time, and I can confirm this since I was the one who ended him when he tried to enslave me by threatening the life of a hostage. With the aid of a seal master, I was able to break the seal on them and get them to talk. The seal on the bottom of this scroll contains copies of the video of their confessions in full, as well as the pictures of the dead orphans, to show you just what I had to see with my own eyes. But before I announce the man who ordered such horrific things be done, allow me to explain why he did so. My name is Naruto, and that is how I wish to remain, since my last name is cursed now more than ever. But for the sake of the truth, my last name is Namikaze. I am the bastard son of Minato Namikaze, one he never attempted to claim until I made a name for myself in full as I am now. My mother was named Mocha, and she herself was the disowned daughter of the kind family from Fire Country. She left her home and family to be with Minato out of love, but he had done so out of greed, since he wanted access to some of her family's immense wealth. But when the truth of her disownment became known to him, he abandoned her little less than a month before I myself was born. My mother had known no other life than that of a noble, and so she struggled to make ends meet as she supported me. I was all she had left in the world, and she loved me with all her heart as I did her in full. But time whittled her resolve down, and she needed help. So she went to beg the man who sired their child for aid, but he not only hurt her to send a message, he threatened my life along with her own if she ever came back. My mother never recovered from that day and fell into a depression she could not break free of. 2 weeks passed and she herself passed away, leaving me alone in the world with no parents. It was only by finding her journal that I learned these truths for myself, and I set out to become strong, so as to one day face the man who refused to acknowledge my existence. But he tried to ruin my future by signing paperwork that forever forbid me from entering the Shinobi Academy out of fear that I would be discovered by those he did not want to know about me, namely his own family that he started elsewhere, one that any who know of him know about since it is public knowledge. So I left the village and set out to become as I am now. And soon after my name became known, there have been countless attempts by Konoha forces to force me into their service. Yet no matter what they sent I did not submit. Multiple root ambushes, multiple Yamanaka clan member attempts to bend my mind to force subservience, and now this. The man who ordered this tragedy was none other than Minato Namikaze himself. I swore vengeance years ago for making my life a living hell by not aiding me and sabotaging my attempts to become something, and I let him know this personally as he tried in vain to get me to join Konoha in the belief that the Yamanaka he had delved into my mind had succeeded in his task. But when he learned it failed he got violent and nearly tried to use force once more, but stayed his hand given the numerous connections I have all over would only be a major hindrance to the village if angered. Minato is a monster who does not like when things do not go as he wishes them, and since I refused to join his forces time and time again, he thought to show me what he was capable of as a means of scaring me into submission. But I will not submit as he wanted. I have decided to let the world know of his crimes to not only myself, but the other children he ordered to be slaughtered in some twisted attempt to force me into submitting. So I ask all who see the truth, will you not allow me to avenge them all? To seek the justice that we so rightly deserve? I await your replies. The Surgeon of Death. Naruto Law. Founder of the newly formed Law clan. With the letter written fully, he took the pictures he mentioned in the letter, as well as one of many copies of the video and sealed it at the bottom before he rolled up the scroll and summoned a crow. He showed him the list of places he was sending these messages, with all the recipients being higher-ups in their countries, such as daimyos as well as noble men and women. The crow read off the first name and flew off to deliver the first of many messages that Naruto was having written. Luckily he had shadow clones to aid him, otherwise this would take forever to finish. Minato had done as he had to scare him and force him to join Konoha, but Naruto was going to turn this on the man and show the world just what kind of monster he truly was. He warned the man when he was in Konoha for the Chunin exams that he was friends with many influential people, but apparently the man had gone literally mad in the head and forgotten that bit of information as he ordered his shinobi to commit such atrocities. And when the world saw just what Minato would do to win in the end, so as to get his way, no one would mourn him in death. But as this was all happening with his letters being sent to any and all who could get the word out of the atrocities that had been committed, there was a large funeral taking place in Konoha for the once proud kunoichi Naruko Uzumaki Namikaze. Multiple doctors had tried time and time again to heal her from the poison that she was injected with, but Naruto had done his job too well, so it was impossible to make a cure. Eventually, Minato knew that he couldn't let his daughter suffer like this, and was the one to give her a lethal dose of adrenaline, so that she finally could rest in peace. All her friends who were still alive, and able to, as well as friends of the family, had turned up for the funeral, and right now it was nearing its end, with the body being laid to rest. Minato was furious that Naruto had done this to him, and he could only inwardly smirk since his retaliation strike would do even worse to Naruto in the end. The brat had not submitted by force or even my mental conversion, so he would instill fear so deep into the brat, the fear that he had the power to kill off anyone he cared for, until the boy was begging him to stop. And even then Minato would not. He wanted Naruto to be a broken mess, so that he would be in the perfect state to mold into a subservient member of their village. But as Minato's mind was going deeper into his insane, logistical thought process, one person there was thinking on other things entirely. Drea was a sage, one who had been told by his summons years ago about a prophecy that involved a student of his becoming the key to either the survival or the destruction of the shinobi way itself. It mentioned an Uzumaki who contained the QB would be trained by him, but now that Naruto was dead, it seemed like the prophecy was dead, along with her, and would never come to fruition. He had not told anyone about this since he feared what others would do with this information, since people could be greedy and try to warp it for their own gain. But he was not like that. Sure, he peeped on women and was a massive pervert, yet that was honestly the worst thing about him. He thought big picture here and wanted to see what the future held with the prophecy itself being fulfilled, yet now that would no longer be possible. But the thing about destiny is that many people assume they know the full picture, but never realize there is more to it than meets the eye. It never went as people thought it would. Case in point. In the entire history of the Uzumaki clan itself, there had only ever been one person who was exiled from the clan itself. The reasons for why this came to be were lost to time, as was the name of the man himself. But that man was stripped down to nothing, had numerous seals that stripped him of his strength, as well as all knowledge gifted to him by his now former family, so he would remember nothing about them, nor would his descendants benefit from their genetics. They would still have them, but there would be no benefits for it. That man would travel about until one day he found his passion as a merchant, who would then meet the woman who would bear his child, and it was that son of his that would go on to start the kind family of Fire Country. A family so powerful politically that no one would dare to oppose them other than the Fire Daio himself. And for generations this remained true. At least, until the now last surviving member of the family orchestrated their utter destruction, so now only he remained with their genetics in his makeup. And wouldn't you know it, but the boy, who did what many deemed impossible, had found a means to acquire the QB within himself, and to top it off, had been taught by Drea. Sure, it was only one jutsu, but it was still taught to him by the man. Like I said before, destiny. It never goes as people think it will. Chapter 12, The Beginning After the End. The scrolls Naruto had sent throughout the elemental countries left the people speechless. So many things were going through their minds as the news of what they had heard sank in. To actually hear that Minato Namikaze not only ordered the slaughter of orphan children, but had abandoned his one flesh and blood before he was even born was far more unforgivable than anything else he could have possibly done. Sure, the man was hated by the village of Iwa given he had slaughtered their shinobi, but that had been war and people die in war. This was nothing more than the actions of a man who had clearly lost his mind. Speaking of the people of Iwa, many of them were having conflicted emotions right now. For a large portion of the village, they had lost loved ones to the forces of Konoha in the Third Shinobi War, with many of them being by the hands of Minato himself. So to hear that the man they had accepted as one of their own was related to their village's worst enemy was quite a bit to process. At first their deeply rooted hatred of the man ignited their rage to the point they almost wanted to kill the young man to end the bloodline of Minato, but then they stopped as rationality came back. Naruto had never attacked their home and had in fact not only saved Onoki as well as his granddaughter before they ever got to know the man, but he had come and visited without an ounce of hatred or ill will towards them in any way. He had healed those who paid for it without any sort of prejudice, and it was then that they remembered that the man had openly denounced the name Namikaze, as he himself was never accepted to be one given he was abandoned before birth and wanted nothing to do with a man who would order the deaths of so many innocent children. So while at first they were enraged about the truth, it slowly went away given the boy was not his father since he went the other route of healing instead of mass murdering people. Now while Kiri might have argued that point given his attack against their forces, literally wiped out their forces to the point Kiri was no longer even a shinobi village, but like I said, it wasn't around anymore to complain. As various people all over heard about this, those in power all began to cut ties from Konoha entirely, along with Fire Country. They did not explain as to why, since they didn't wish to speak about it, all of them assuming that the same one who sent the scrolls speaking of the tragedy that had happened would be the one to deal with it, and they would not deny the young man his vengeance. The economy of Konoha took a sharp dive as so many people stopped trading with them, and no one was giving Minato any form of explanation as to why this was happening. He had Drea use his spy network to try and get the answers to their dilemma, but by the time they would have gotten back with an answer it would have already been too late. The Fire Daio had all but demanded an answer as to why his country was suffering like this, since he truly had no clue as to what the hell was happening to cause this. He was trying to go the same route as Drea with informats getting the information he sought, but even his own sources weren't fast enough. He finally got his answers in the form of Naruto himself, who came before the man and explained why the rest of the world was against them. The daimyos were doing this so as to force the Fire Daio to take action against Minato in a manner that he couldn't try to find any sort of middle ground. There was no gray area to this matter, since it was either he supported the man's actions in mass, murdering orphans, or he would order the man to pay for his horrific actions. This went a long way to show just how much influence Naruto had in the world if he was capable of persuading so many people to do this. He might be a very well-known doctor, but this was still not something just anyone could manage to pull off. The Fire Daio listened to the horrific things Naruto spoke about that he had seen that day. He spared no details and even showed the man the evidence he had, which made the Fire Daio puke since he didn't have the stomach to see such a thing. But even though the man nearly begged Naruto to stop showing him the truth, Naruto did not cease in doing so. In the end, the Fire Daio was utterly furious at the actions of Minato. It was when Naruto saw the man in this state that he finally asked the Fire Daio his one request. "Let me be the one to end the life of the man." The Fire Daio was surprised to hear that Naruto wanted to play the role of executioner given his occupation as a doctor went the whole other direction. But in the end, the man agreed since Naruto had been the one to show him the reason for the sudden loss of trade with everyone else. As he left, Naruto pulled out a scroll, one of the ones he had written so many times to spread the truth to everyone of influence, and tossed it to the Fire Daio. He told the man to read it, and he would understand why he wanted to kill the man, and then he left via summon door, before the Fire Daio could say anything else. He read the scroll Naruto had tossed to him, and like Naruto said, he understood the reasoning for his hatred of the man perfectly. But along with that, it would seem like the Fire Daio owed Naruto a massive favor, since he had apparently done something he himself had been trying to deal with for years. The Kind family had been a thorn in the side of his father as well as his grandfather before it became his problem upon taking his seat as the Daio of Fire Country. They were greedy, narcissistic, and used so many illegal methods to get what they wanted in life, but they did it in a manner that no one could trace back to them, so they couldn't do anything about it. Even if they did, the loss of their family would have been a major hole in the economy to replace. They got so fat-headed with their egos that the head of their family was basically proposing, and by that I mean attempting to find whatever means possible to blackmail, that his son and Azula should marry. And the Fire Daio would never do that, since he didn't want his family associated with theirs. But apparently Naruto, who he knew had something to do with it since the scroll explained he was the son of their disowned daughter Mocha, had found a means to eliminate them in a manner that many of the families that the Kind spent so long destroying had been able to rebuild themselves back to nearly their former glory when they took back their stolen wealth. This made it so their economy was not as greatly affected as he had initially thought it would be. So since the boy had been an actual godsend to deal with that major thorn in his side, he would grant the boy the rights to end the life of the man who took so much from him. So with that in mind, the Fire Daio called his guards and left for Konoha personally to see to it that the man was imprisoned until said time where Naruto could deal with him. And all while this was happening, Minato was growing more enraged that the men he sent to do the deed had not returned and reported that they had been successful. They were children for Kami's sake, so how hard was it to kill them? But what made it worse was that he had to suffer major financial losses not only for the village for reasons he was still unsure of right now, but Jiraiya was out and about seeking answers to that, but personal as well. See, most of the money he had access to came from his wife since when they got married their accounts merged into one. But now that the divorce had become official, Kushina took all her money from it. What made it worse was the fact that 98% of the money in the account was hers since as the now last Uzumaki, at least that she knew, she had been given sole ownership of her homeland, the island country of Whirlpool. The massive amount of riches she got from there alone meant she was set for life, and so she was in no way in any sort of financial straits given her massive wealth. Minato had actually tried to talk to her to try and patch things up between the two of them somehow, but she would always glare at him and just refuse to talk to him. But she did always smile a bit for some reason that was more than a little bit unsettling, like she was saying, she knew something bad was going to happen to him and couldn't wait to see it happen. This pissed him off enough as it was, but what made it worse was the fact that he saw her with another man as she went out late to get drinks. This hurt his pride as a man, and that only fueled his rage more. This only played into his already cracked sanity, and he was waiting for his remaining root members to return so as to use them to eliminate any and all people Kushina decided to date. In his mind she was his and it was either him, or no one, and since she was the last of her clan, she would grow pretty desperate to have another child as soon as possible to continue on the family lineage. But as he was forming so many plans in his mind to get his now ex-wife to come crawling back to him, one of his scouts came in and told him that the fire daio was on his way and was about a day's ride away from the village. This caused Minato to raise an eyebrow since he had received no news or even a scroll stating the man was going to arrive in advance. This either meant he was here for some sort of surprise inspection like his father had done with Hiruzen when he was Hokage or his grandfather had done with Hashirama, or he was coming to employ them to seek out the means for the sudden loss of trade with pretty much everyone. Well, the good thing about the second one, at least, was that he was currently looking into just why the trade stopped, so he was at least able to tell the fire daio he was working on at the moment. So Minato was not suspecting anything as the fire daio arrived the next day and entered his office. Minato had gotten out of his chair to greet the man as well as shake his hand as was customary with a courteous bow, but the second he went to extend his hand out towards the fire daio, he had a pair of chakra suppressing cuffs slapped onto his hand. Minato felt so weak, but he was even more pissed about what the hell was just happening right now since it was so sudden. Before the fire daio said anything, he ordered his men to bind Minato, which they did to his extreme ire. Only after the man was soundly bound in place on his knees was he told that he was under arrest. Minato's face lost its color as he heard this, but even more so when he heard the reasoning behind it. It shouldn't have been possible for the root shinobi to turn on him due to the seals on their tongue. It was only then that Kushina's smirk came back to his mind. The Uzumaki were known for their mastery with seals, and knowing Naruto had already set him up in a way that Kushina learned of his infidelity, he wouldn't put it past him to get Kushina to help him remove the seals on a root member or two. Minato had tried to open his mouth to plead his case, but the fire daio didn't want to hear it and ordered his mouth gagged since there was nothing that could justify such actions against children. Even in war it wouldn't have been right since they were not allied to any village at all and were simply surviving to make a life for themselves later with the aid of Naruto, a man who knew what it felt like to live without parents. Minato roared in a muffled rage as he tried in vain to break free from his bindings in some way. He would have used the Hurricane since he had plenty of those set up for emergencies, but the chakra suppression cuffs made it impossible to use them. The man was dragged out in full view of everyone, who all came out to see why he was being arrested by the fire daio of all things. The guards dragged him to the center of town, where the men who had been sent there had erected a makeshift stage, so that the fire daio could speak to the masses. Once enough people were there to witness this, the fire daio read off the charges against Minato, with many people at first calling it false, but the more he read off, their opinions started to change quickly. They were made known that it was Minato's actions that led to the loss of trading between their country and the others. To make the point hit home, the fire daio pulled out the various pictures of the slaughtered children and threw them into the crowd so the people could themselves see what the man had ordered done. And it was then that their views of the man were ultimately destroyed entirely, with the masses calling out for his blood. So in the end, after hearing the people call for his immediate execution, the fire daio passed judgment on Minato and it was death. Minato's eyes opened wide in horror that he had lost the second to last thing he had in the form of his public image like this. And as he was being dragged away towards the prison cell he would be staying in until the time of his execution, he saw Kushina smirking at him in the crowd and angrily roared as loud as his muffled mouth could at her. But as he did that, something came back to his mind. The letter had ended with the lines, "I have taken one out of the three things you care for the most from you, and I assure you that the second is not far behind. And soon enough, the third will be gone as well." His eyes opened wide once more in understanding. Naruto had known he would go off the deep end and do something drastic to try and force him into submission. He had been waiting for it to happen, so as to expose him and turn the people against him like this. And like the idiot he was, he had fallen for the trap once more, and now he was going to pay the price for it. Days later, word spread far as well as fast all through the elemental continent about Minato's arrest as well as the fire daio decree that the man would be executed. Many people were happy to hear this, since after the things they had heard or seen via the pictures Naruto had sent out, the man deserved it and it was only bad that he could only die once. If it were at all possible to make him suffer more than that it would have been done, but what could you do? The date of the man's execution was set, with many of those people who hated Minato for one reason or another all flocking towards Konoha to personally see the man die. It had been a long time coming in their books, but it would be so worth it. But while they were all doing that, Naruto had been sent a letter personally from the Fire Daio, expressing his sincere apologies about what had befallen him as well as the children he had done so much for. The scroll had the date of the man's execution set, and Naruto smirked since the day had finally come where he could end the man who had thought him so worthless or at least a tool to be made subservient when he actually became something. Naruto then immediately aided the man who brought the note to him since the man had basically been running near non-stop and seemed like he was about to fall over dead. After about 20 minutes of medical attention, the man was right as rain and was able to go back without the fear of suffering a heart attack, but Naruto did tell him to quit the heavy smoking since it was what was messing with his lungs and would lead to problems later if he didn't. Sure, Naruto had a smoke now and again, but that was far in between as well as to calm nerves. Heavy smokers did it because of addiction. He didn't suffer that given his blood filtered the nicotine, so he didn't get the side effects. But now the day had come for Minato's execution, and so he went home and got Haku, who wanted to see this as well given she now knew the truth of his past. She wanted to be there so as to support him in this defining moment of his life, and with a quick kiss on the lips, she showed that she would always be there for him. Naruto had smiled as the two of them exited the door and walked towards the front gates of Konoha. An hour later, Minato was taken from his cell roughly towards the arena where his execution was to take place, all the while he wanted to struggle, but lacked the energy to do so since while locked away in his cell he had been given nothing to drink or eat to keep his strength up. Eventually they made it to the middle of the arena, where a post was placed dead center within it. There he was bound to with his hands behind his back, and he was able to see the many people who had come to watch him die today. Many of the faces in the crowd he did not know, but a few he did, like Onoki himself, along with the Raikage himself. He could only growl in anger that they would be able to see him die like this instead of in battle like he would have preferred. But now that Minato was bound there, it made him wonder just where the executioner was, since there was no one else in the arena with him. The Fire Daio along with a few others were in the area reserved for them while the various people sat in the stands. So just who would be the one to actually kill him? He got his answer about a few minutes later, and dear Kami did it in rage, him like nothing else had done before. Naruto had come into the arena through a door, and as he made himself known the people stopped their booing and sayings of burn in hell towards Minato and began to cheer for Naruto. Yet even though that might be the case, Naruto paid no mind to their cheers since he was not doing this for their adulation or the like. He was not doing it for the fame of killing the man to make his reputation skyrocket, or anything like that. This was pure simple vengeance, one that had been long in the making. But while many had assumed that Naruto would get right to the execution, albeit in a manner that was extremely painful given the rumors many had heard about what he did to those who pissed him off, and Minato was the epitome of that very type of person, he didn't. In fact, the first thing he did was pull out a large circular vial of blood and break it in his hand. The blood he then used to flow down his cane and take the form of a shovel. This caused many people to question just what the hell he was planning to do with that, but they all watched since the answers to their questions would be known soon enough. When the shovel was formed, he stopped a few yards short of where Minato was and began to dig into the ground. This made Minato's eyebrow raise in confusion since it made no sense to him why Naruto was doing this. Was the brat planning to bury him alive or something like that? I see you are confused, said Naruto simply as he stopped shoveling for a moment to speak his mind to Minato, and while you might not be able to say such a thing or even ask why I am doing this given you are gagged, I understand that look. So allow me to answer your non-asked question that is clearly on your mind. I am digging you a grave. And even though I hate you with every last ounce of my being, you did provide half the genetics to give me life. So for the one good thing you did for me in my entire life, I'll return the favor and dig you a grave instead of throwing your corpse for animals to feast on. And for that you should be grateful. Minato grunted angrily as he was forced to watch Naruto resume his digging. True, he could have done this in a far easiest manner with a room set up, but this was a moment he wanted to take his time with. The man was going to die anyway no matter what happened, so why rush it? It took a few minutes, but eventually he finished digging the hole and jumped out before absorbing the blood that he had used to make the shovel. The dirt was filtered out since it couldn't enter the pores, and then he spat it back into another vial that was the same he had crushed to get the blood. "Well," said Naruto with a look of seriousness on his face, "here we are at this point of time. I have to say you truly surprised me with your actions by ordering so many lives snuffed out like that. While I had known you would do something in retaliation, I had no idea just how much of one you planned to commit. I just have to ask, why? What could you have possibly thought would be the end result of your actions?" Naruto stood there for about 10 seconds listening to Minato's muffled words before he sighed to himself. "Well, I can't quite get the answers I seek with you gagged now, can I?" said Naruto before he twitched his finger a bit. The wire connected to that gloved finger easily cut the side of the gag, so Minato was finally able to spit it out and speak his mind. "Do you have any idea?" started Minato, but he wasn't able to say any more since Naruto held out his hand and was using multiple wires to constrict Minato's throat so he could not speak. "If all you are going to do is throw out insults or statements of me doing what I shouldn't have done, because of your vain reasons like the cliché villain you are," said Naruto, all while not losing his look of seriousness since this was not a joking matter, "then I am not going to let you speak since I neither care nor do I want to hear it." He then retracted the wires from the man's throat, which led to Minato coughing since he couldn't really breathe when they were wrapped around his throat like that. "So skipping all the hate-filled dialogue between us," said Naruto since he wanted to keep this conversation short and to the point, "why did you order the deaths of so many children? What could you possibly think would be the end result?" "I wanted to make you suffer," laughed Minato weakly, "since you have done so much and ruined so many of the plans I had in motion. Then to top it off, you killed my daughter." "So you think that your daughter's life is worth nearly 1,000 children?" asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. "You're damn right I do," shouted Minato in rage. At this point he didn't care to silence himself on the matter since he was already sentenced to death. What else could they do to him? "My daughter was a prodigy of a kunoichi. Those little brats were worthless. They weren't even shinobi. Just because they weren't in the profession you personally saw as the only thing worth a damn," started Naruto as he leaned on his cane, "does not make their lives worth anything less than anyone else. And even though you put your own daughter so high on a pedestal, honesting thinking that she was a gift to the people of Konoha, a gift that came from your genetics, you forsook me, the other child who was born with the same genetics. Says a lot about your character right there. So just what the fuck do you want from me, brat?" spat out Minato with venom-laced words. "An apology." "An apology," said Naruto, right before he actually began to laugh since that was actually a funny response to hear out of the blue like that. "No no no. If I wanted that, Minato, I wouldn't have done even a fraction of the things I did to you. Funny how you saw me as worthless, yet I still managed to kill your daughter. Goes to show that your judgment sucks big time, and I would tell you to work on that, but you aren't going to live past today, so that advice would be moot." "So what exactly do you want from me?" asked Minato since he just wanted this to end already. If he was going to be killed, then just kill him already. "Well, that is quite simple to explain," said Naruto as he walked forward and put down a scroll as well as a vial of bluish-orange liquid in front of Minato and then stepped away from him. "You see, I had initially planned to just kill you and be done with it, but as a man with an inquisitive mind I found myself in the perfect situation to answer a hypothetical question that has been in my mind for years." "And just what the hell could be swirling around in that mind of yours?" asked Minato sarcastically since to be honest he didn't really care to hear it. "My question was who was stronger between the two of us," said Naruto simply, "since both of us have done so much stuff to earn a reputation that makes us feared within the shinobi system, with the only discernible difference being that I myself am not a shinobi. So what I want to do is fight you at your peak performance right here and now, so that I can get the answer to my question. And what if I don't wish to dance to your tune?" spat out Minato. "Come on," said Naruto with a chuckle, "a man with your ego? You are the type of person who wanted to go out in a fight, not like this. So why not have a fight to the death like I am offering? At least this way you have a chance to kill me other than dying on your knees like the dog that you are." Minato looked at Naruto with all the rage he could muster showing in his eyes. "I am going to take the murderous look in your eyes as a yes," said Naruto with a chuckle, so I am going to cut you loose and you will drink the vial in front of you. It isn't poison or the like since that would defeat the purpose of me fighting you. It will heal you back to your pristine condition, so you can fight me without excuse at your full power while the scroll I put, there is the kunai you used to make such a name for yourself. Can't fight the yellow flash if he is unable to use his signature weapon now, can I? Naruto then swiped down with his hand and the wires cut the ropes that bound Minato to the post as well as shredded the pole itself into splinters. Minato fell forward weak since he was still so from lack of food and water. While his first thought was to throw the vial away to spite Naruto, he couldn't deny he was too weak right now to be much of a threat to anyone. So with reluctance, he uncorked the vial and tipped his head back to drink the contents of it. As soon as he chugged it down, he began to cough in pain as he felt as though his body was on fire. At first he guessed he had drank poison of some sort, but the pain went away not too long afterwards and he felt as though he had slept for an entire week with all the energy to back it up. He then picked up the scroll Naruto had left him and unsealed his tri-pronged kunai and placed them in the pouch he used to store them that was sealed in the scroll as well. So now that you are nice and artificially rested, said Naruto, please attack at your earliest convenience since my life isn't doomed to end today if I win. Naruto then snapped his fingers and mumbled room to set one up that surrounded the entire arena itself. The people in the stands were not within it, but many questioned what exactly this strange bubble was, Minato included, but he wasn't really given the leisure to argue or get an answer. Right now he would do all in his power to kill this brat who had brought down everything he had spent most of his life making. From his reputation to his family, this brat had destroyed them all. Everyone watched with held breath from the stands as they waited to see just who would make the first move here. Plenty of people questioned why Naruto was giving Minato a chance to fight back like this, but to be honest they were curious as to see who would win this fight between the two of them, so they would watch regardless. It was Minato who made the first move as he threw a kunai into Naruto's heart and used the Hiration to teleport up close and personal faster than most people could see it. He knew from the Chunin exams that Naruto used wires and so long distance was not a viable option if he was hoping to win this. But even though he had pulled out another kunai to stab the boy in the neck, Naruto had grabbed him by the face and full-on slammed it into the ground hard enough to crack it. What made it more painful was that Naruto had used his steel release with a mixture of the scorch release to make the sudden motion even faster by having the explosive jets of flames act as an accelerant, and so the attack was stronger than it normally would be. The people heard the crunch of bones breaking, which if Naruto had to take a guess was the front of his skull along with his nose as well. But he was not done yet since he then lifted up Minato by the head since the man was in a major daze caused by the concussive blow to the head and used the explosive release to blast the man straight out of his hand. Minato screamed in pain as he felt his face all but burn off as he used his hands in vain to try and soothe the pain in some manner. The pain eventually did end, but it was because Naruto had pulled out a syringe with the same liquid he had given Minato to heal the first time, but this one was in a syringe that he threw into Minato before he stomped onto the plunger hard, so it injected itself into the man. The concoction healed the man once again back to his prime, and with that Minato got back to his feet. You don't get to die so easily, said Naruto with a glare of his own, since you get to pay for the lives you ordered snuffed out in some vein as well as idiotic attempts to control me. What the hell did you do to me? Asked Minato as he was understandably confused as to how he was healed like he was all of a sudden. I just injected into you a failed product of my research, said Naruto simply, since what it was meant to be was a sort of cure-all type of medicine I was hoping to develop so as to help people at a bargain price so they no longer had to pay for expensive surgery. Yet it was a failure, no matter what I tried, and so it was an abandoned project. Well, it seems to have worked perfectly for me, brat, said Minato. Oh, said Naruto with a chuckle, it would seem that way, but you would be surprised as to the reality of your situation right now. But enough about that, I do believe that we are still fighting to the death here. Minato growled in anger that this brat of an opponent was acting so nonchalant about this whole thing, like Minato himself was a joke and not even a challenge. He would make the brat regret his actions in front of all these people. So he used the proper hand signs to summon up multiple pillars of stone all around the arena. Once they had sprouted out, he threw the majority of his tri-pronged kunai into the air so that they landed all over. This way he could be sporadic in his use of the Hiroshin and Naruto wouldn't be able to see where he was coming from. Minato then smirked as he teleported to one of his kunai and quickly saw that he was in the perfect position to strike. So he took the initiative and pounced from the side of the pillar. He was on to strike him in the back. But to his shock, Naruto easily dodged his attack as well as the few punches and the kicks that followed. Naruto then grabbed the man's foot on that last kick and used his explosive release to blow it off so that Minato was left with nothing more than a bloody stump now. Of course the man yelled in pain, but his leg was blown up so it was understandable to all who saw this. Naruto pulled out another syringe and plunged it into Minato, who growled before disappearing once again via Hiroshin. The man needed to think up a proper plan to end the life of this brat, but there were so many unknown variables that were working against him right now that he didn't quite know how to do it. Like right now, he had no idea that Naruto was summoning up his own blood that was pooling down his cane towards the skull at the end. Once there, he formed it into the sai he liked to use and swung it in a full 360 degrees, slicing all the pillars at the base and causing them to tip over. Minato struggled to find balance here with the majority of the arena being in disarray with the rubble. But as he struggled to find steady footing, he did notice Onoki as well as in the crowd close to one another. If he was going to die, he might as well end the life of his old rivals as well, so he pulled out an explosive kunai that had been in his pouch to throw at them, yet he never was given the chance since his body was grabbed by Naruto's wires and pulled down to the ground hard. Yet he never hit the ground, since Naruto slammed his steel-skinned fist into the man's chest hard to the point his ribs were all but shattered from the impact. The man went flying towards the wall and hit it hard as he vomited blood, but when he had gone flying, he had dropped his explosive kunai that Naruto picked up and threw it into Minato's chest before detonating it. Quite a few people actually puked as they saw the man's chest blown open to the point that they could see his organs as they began to spill out. Yet once again Naruto stopped the man from dying by injecting him with the same concoction he had already 3 times. Minato's screams could be heard by everyone as he felt his body reset itself from the inside, which was painful beyond description. After about 3 minutes of painful regeneration, Minato looked at Naruto, but while there was still the murderous rage that had never left them since the beginning of this fight, there was a trace amount of fear now that Naruto clearly saw. The man had tried to kill him and failed to do so twice now. And not only that, but he had basically been killed with that last attack and was only alive due to Naruto's intervention for reasons he was not quite sure of right now. Minato knew that with the current gear he had he would more than likely not win, so he needed to flee and prepare for his revenge. Sure, he would be labeled as a missing nin, but he was already marked for death, plus he was an SS rank threat in the bingo book, so he knew he would manage for long enough. Just as long as he could end Naruto's life with his own hands he would be good. So with the mindset of trying to flee, he threw a kunai as far as he could outside the arena, or at least he tried to. "Tect," said Naruto with a smirk as he pointed towards Minato. The kunai stopped mid-air, turned around and then shot towards Minato who just barely managed to dodge it since while he was not expecting it, his instincts were still working fine. "Trying to run away, are you Minato? TSK. To think that the man many fear, so much to the point they flee from him is himself fleeing from an opponent. Oh the irony." Naruto then pointed at Minato again, this time all the various tri-pronged kunai shot out of the rubble surrounding them towards Minato himself. The man tried to dodge them all, but he was unable to dodge them all, since there were too many to do it successfully. The places he was pierced were all non-vital places, so he would still live. He pulled them out of his body and prepared to try and use the Rasengan against the brat here and now, but even though he managed to conjure the jutsu into his hand, he then fell forward and began to cough hard as blood began to pool out of his mouth. "Oh goody," said Naruto with a clap of his hands. "It seems like the side effects are starting to get to you. What have you done to me?" shouted Minato in pain before he puked blood. Yet the scary thing about it was that it wasn't crimson but more or less black in color. "That concoction I mentioned before," said Naruto with a smirk, "this is the reason why it was a failure. It does what it is supposed to with the healing of your body from some of the most extreme injuries, but the issue is that 24 hours later, your body begins to rot from the inside and what is happening to you happens. Since I injected you with multiple doses of the stuff, it only sped up the end result. You were never going to live past today, Minato, and the moment you drank that first one you were screwed and living on limited time. Minato laid on the ground in tremendous amounts of pain, as he felt the very blood within him boil. He knew that Naruto was doing this on purpose to make him suffer longer than necessary, but he had a hidden ace up his sleeves as well. Minato was like many, a man in the world who feared death, but what he feared more than that was that if the case came where he was killed, the person who killed him would become more renowned than even himself. Minato was a vain man who really only cared about his self-image, with his own family being secondary in his eyes. While he knew eventually he would die, with there being no means to stop it, he at least had a plan for whenever someone tried to kill him like this. The method involved making a deal with the Shinigami itself, but the price would be his soul if ever came the case where he went this route. But it didn't bother him none, since it wouldn't just be his own soul who would be taken, but his opponent's as well. And he would be the one laughing the hardest in the end, since he would deny the person who killed him the means to die and go either up or down depending on their actions in life. So now that he was in such a state where he was almost dead, he used what strength he had to make the hand signs to perform his final jutsu in his life. Naruto had turned around as he pulled out a smoke, so as to watch the man suffer painfully to the end. He could have just killed him from the beginning, but like he said, the man had to pay for all the lives he ordered slaughtered. Yet his instincts went wild in that instance and told him to turn around. One does not become a SS rank threat in the bingo book and not have some type of trick for situations like this. And just as he suspected, he saw Minato ending his hand signs with a cruel smirk on his face, which made Naruto raise an eyebrow in confusion. That look of confusion changed to one of pain, though, as he felt his chest stabbed by a ghostly arm of some sort. The crowd was shocked to see this, but even more so as the sky darkened a bit as the Shinigami itself showed itself. It had shoved its arm through Minato to get to Naruto, and the young man was feeling pain like he had not felt since his impromptu brain surgery when he had injected himself with the means to counter the Yamanaka family jutsu. This made him realize that even with the tampering of his own nerves, so as to not feel pain, this was his literal soul feeling this pain, and there was no surgery that could stop pain there. Both Haku and Kuroichi called out his name as they saw their beloved literally held on to by the deity of death itself. In their minds, this did not bode well for Naruto. "You stupid worthless boy," said Minato with a crazy look on his face, "if I am going to die, then I will take you with me to suffer for an eternity." "Haven't you heard, Minato?" said Naruto painfully, since he felt as the Shinigami began to pull his soul out of his body. "I am the surgeon of death, and I am able to do things deemed impossible." Naruto then inwardly called upon Kyuubi, who heard his call and fulfilled his end of the bargain the two of them had made. Naruto silently prayed that this worked, since, if not, he was fucked, since even with his abilities he was pretty much stuck right now, since the deity had a firm grip on his soul. Kyuubi injected his chakra into Naruto fully as well as willingly, so while the process was painful for him, it was nowhere near the levels of pain he felt having his soul ripped out. The sudden influx of power was enough to break the hold the Shinigami had on his soul, and he saw the deity's hand retract from his chest and back into Minato's. Said man was shocked, since Naruto had become enveloped in a dark, nearly blood-red aura of chakra, with his eyes changing into the Mangekyo Sharingan in his fury of nearly losing his very soul. The influx of power pulsed out of him in a manner that caused the immediate area to crack from how intense it was concentrated. Naruto's rage had reached maximum levels at this point, since even though the man had lost, he went the path of a sore loser and tried to take him with a suicidal attack. While he himself was no expert on jutsu, or the like, he did know that summoning the Shinigami cost the user's soul to activate. The people all around him in the arena felt the full force of his haki, with many looking upon Naruto and seeing a monstrous apparition appear before them, massive in size. The Inuzuka who had come to see the fight nearly pissed themselves, since they had at one point been the targets of said apparition and knew just how terrifying it was to be targeted by it. Various people, mostly civilians and the weaker of the shinobi, began to faint with their mouths foaming as they lost consciousness. Even Kuroichi as well as Haku had felt his rage fully. It brought them to tears to feel his rage and to know that he had been bottling up so much of the emotion, to let it become like this. Onoki was terrified, but glad as all hell that he was not Naruto's enemy. If Minato had done so much damage with his one signature jutsu all those years ago, he could only speculate what sort of destruction Naruto would unleash if he ever thought to actually do something like that. Minato was growing weaker by the second given the entity, was now beginning to rip his soul out, which wasn't helped by the fact his body was degrading quickly, and he was glaring as well as scowling in rage that Naruto had managed to counter his final trump card. How he had done it was a mystery since it didn't make sense in the least. But then he screamed in pain as he felt his own chest getting pierced through the front to add to the pain of the Shinigami. Naruto had used his steel release to harden his hand and quite literally penetrated Minato's chest with it. He was using this as a means to spread his infectious blood so that Minato could no longer fight back, so that any other plans he might have in his head were stopped cold. "This is for the lives you have ruined," growled Naruto in rage, "for my mother, for the innocent children who you ordered killed. And lastly for me, the son you deemed worthless and abandoned." Minato was in tremendous amounts of pain right now as the blood that had spread in his body through Naruto's impaled hand stiffened him up to the point he couldn't counter him in any way. "Feel the weight of your actions, and suffer for an eternity by the hands of the entity you summoned to try and kill me." Gamma knife. The people in the stands had to literally look away as the sheer amount of power he put into his ability was blinding to look at. The screams they heard Minato shout out would ring in their ears for a while after all was said and done, but after what seemed like hours yet was only about a minute, the area was no longer awash in a green-tinted light, so they could see what had happened. To be honest, the adults who had come to see what would take place all felt so glad they had left their kids at home, since what they saw would have haunted their dreams for years to come if they saw what was before them. Minato Namikaze. The once great man who had such renown throughout the lands and was feared by most people who he faced, was dead. That alone was not what was horrifying, since even the most famous people will die, but Minato's death was not natural. What they saw was the man's entire body up to the neck burned to a blackened crisp. Above his neck though was a different matter, since what they saw was the top of his head popped out like something had burst out of it, which in a manner, it did, since the attack Naruto had used had caused Minato's head to explode from the top. He then pulled out his hand, since the man was dead, and he no longer needed to have it inside the man's chest. He then kicked the man backwards into the hole he had dug up before the fight even started. To be honest, he hadn't noticed it was there, since there was rubble everywhere when he kicked the now deceased man, but it was like the gods had put him in the perfect spot. Minato's body fell in, with the lower portion of it collapsing like charcoal, leaving only the head in one relative piece. Naruto spat into the hole, then used his shambles to move the dirt back into the hole and compacted it, so it was solid once more, like he hadn't dug up the earth in the first place. Naruto stood there for a minute as he dispelled the room he set up, so many emotions going on through his head, but in the end, the tears began to fall from his eyes as the joy of completing his vengeance came to the forefront of it. So many years of planning had finally come to fruition, and it was all over now. "Our vengeance is complete, mother," laughed Naruto out loud to himself as he used a handkerchief to wipe the tears away. "May your soul now know peace." And with those words spoken, Naruto turned around and began to walk away from this place for the last time in his life, since he would never return after today, but he did stop as he began to leave. He knelt down and picked up his hat, which had gotten blasted off his head in the heat of battle, at what point he couldn't tell you since he himself didn't know. Epilogue. Years had passed from that day, the day where Naruto finally completed his revenge, and life had been good for the now elderly man of a doctor. He lay now on his deathbed at the very old age of 127 with a smile on his face, since he had lived a good life. He had taken proper care of his body to keep it living for so long, which shocked many in his family since he was so old. And as he laid there, he saw his life leading up to this point flashing before his eyes. After he personally killed Minato in such a gruesome manner as he did in front of everybody, he had then left the arena, since he had accomplished what he had set out to do. Minato was the last person on his list for vengeance against, and with his death he was now at peace with himself. So he left the village and returned once more to being the roaming nomadic doctor that he had been for a good chunk of his life. But even though he had completed what he had set out to do, things were happening in the elemental countries that would change them for the better. When Naruto had healed Nagato back into his prime, this had upset someone, as well as something, since it messed heavily with a plan they had for the man that required for him to remain powerful, but in a weakened near-death state, so that they were nothing more than a glass cannon to use before discarding. Because he was no longer that way, the man hidden in the shadows known as Obito had tried to kill Nagato and steal the Rinnegan eyes he had. Obito failed though, since Nagato was far more powerful in his prime than Obito realized, given he only knew the man when he was stuck in his life support device. So after a hard-fought battle, Obito lay slain before Nagato, and with that Nagato reflected back on the words that Naruto had told him about advice for the future and actually saw the wisdom in it. So he disbanded the Akatsuki, which by this point only had about 2 other people, and began to improve Ame itself, which in time he succeeded alongside his future wife Konan. But while Obito had been slain, Zetsu had other plans and disappeared to try and complete them elsewhere. While Naruto had ended the life of Orochimaru, the man's assistant Kabuto still lived and continued right where his former master had left off. He was approached by Zetsu, and the two formed a partnership that would cause the various nations to join forces so as to fight against it. The two of them worked for 3 years, but in that time they formed an army of white Zetsu, as well as the resurrected bodies of the most infamous as well as powerful shinobi, as well as kunoichi, that they could get their hands on. Kabuto in time unleashed this massive army upon the world, and it did serious damage to the surrounding towns before word spread of what they were dealing with. So a cage summit was called, with the seat of Hokage now being taken by the legendary medic Nin Tsunade herself. To many who saw this from an outside point of view, it seemed strange that 2 highly skilled medical professionals would never meet every now and then, but strangely enough that was what happened. It was due to the fact that Tsunade remained in Fire Country while Naruto was a man who traveled all countries, so it was hard to pinpoint him like that. But it turned out there was another reason, as well, that only decreased the likelihood of their meeting up. Tsunade was a gambling addict as well as growing too old for her own tastes. While she was able to hide her real appearance with the signature jutsu that she used, it was always nagging the back of her mind that she was an old woman. While her gambling addiction was pretty intense, it was as she got older that it only got worse, but there was a reason for that. She had heard a rumor, one that interested her immensely, about a procedure that the surgeon of death himself knew that could restore one's youth. No one could either verify or deny this rumor, and people didn't know exactly where it originated from, but the rumor was there. Apparently the procedure was insanely expensive according to what she heard, but it worked perfectly. Tsunade, who at this point was desperate to recover her youth once more, had been gambling like crazy to raise the funds she needed to afford such a thing. And eventually she managed, through the grace of Kami herself she managed. Once she had the funds in hand, she all but ran off to find Naruto, and even then it took her several weeks before she heard he had an office in Spring Country, and mentally screamed at herself that she had tried the hard way to find him instead of just going there. So she went to his office, spoke to the secretary that resided there, who was not Yuna anymore since the young lady had set out on her own now that she had finished her schooling to become a doctor, and so Naruto had sought out another who had been like Yuna in her youth, lost and alone on the streets, and offered them the position so as to have a place to call home. So the appointment was made, and eventually Naruto met with the woman, who all but demanded to know if the rumors she had heard were true about the restoration of one's youth. Naruto had laughed as she asked that and said he could do such a thing, but only once. This was not true, but he wasn't going to let her know that so that in the future, she would keep coming back. The amount of money he was charging for the procedure was no laughing matter, and people could get desperate enough to do countless illegal things to get the funds to live longer like that. He told her the price, which he had thought she had no way of paying, but then it was his turn to be shocked since she pulled out a scroll with just enough money to afford it. This was then preceded by Tsunade fuming over the fact her assistant Shizune also pulled out the amount needed to get the procedure done. She had refused to be the old lady of the group, so she wanted to get younger as well. What had pissed off Tsunade about this was the fact that Shizune had not told her about the massive amount of funds she had, which Shizune chuckled and told her if she had, Tsunade would have just taken it and gambled it all away selfishly, and Tsunade was then stumped since she had no counter to that. While Tsunade got her money from sheer luck through gambling, Shizune had invested hers in multiple businesses that turned profits and grew over time to the point she got this money. So with the payment given, Naruto took genetic samples of both women, asked if they wanted any sort of modifications to their youthful appearance at no extra charge, which both nearly instantly said larger breast sizes, and then began the cloning process in his hidden room. He told them to come back in a month, which confused them since they thought it was like some sort of rare elixir, or something like that. But now they had no idea what he was going to do. He simply told them to come back in 1 month and that they had his word. He would give them what they paid him for. So they left since the man had a reputation of keeping his word no matter the cost. And a month later, after quickly knocking the two now young ladies out in a quick room in shambles, they were both in their new, younger cloned bodies with naturally larger breasts that they were so happy about. They cried anime tears as they shook his hand before running off to have some fun now that they had longer lives. Since then, Naruto hadn't really seen them again, since Tsunade never really needed medical attention from him, nor did Shizune for that matter. But after she got her youthful body back, she had gone back to the village to see how things were given. It had been quite some time since she had been back. She saw that Kakashi, who had been elected as Hokage, was doing a terrible job at it, and it was then that Tsunade offered to take the position to save the village her grandfather had spent so long building. Kakashi was more than happy to abdicate the position to her since he was not one to deal with so much responsibility like that. And thus Tsunade became Hokage and fixed the village right up in nearly no time at all. It just went to show that she had the potential to do it, she just didn't want to before now. So fast forward back to the Cage Summit, where the various cages all allied themselves to fight this great threat, and so a massive army was built to fight in what became known as the Fourth Shinobi War. Many lives were lost in the battle itself, with Onoki being the only cage to actually perish in battle. And when the battle seemed like it would be won by the allied forces, a new obstacle made itself known in the form of Kaguya herself. Zetsu had manipulated Kabuto as he had Obito so as to break her free from her prison, and the damage she did was massive, with nearly 3/5 of the allied forces perishing from her strength alone. The only silver lining to the situation was that the plan had been to seal all the Biju up and turn them once more into the Jubi that they once were so that she could absorb its power, but since 3 of them had gone missing, she only had the power of 6 of them after Zetsu and Kabuto had kidnapped and extracted them. Gaara had been fortunate to have someone resurrect him at the cost of her own life, the others were not so lucky though. And I know what you are thinking right now. You are guessing that Naruto made himself known at this point and helped to defeat Kaguya with his insane abilities, am I right? If you did, sorry to disappoint you, but that is not what had happened. While the war was going on, Naruto as well as Haku, Kurotsuchi, and even Neji and Fu had borrowed an airship from Koike and traveled far to the west. It wasn't to escape the war itself, which they had no idea was even happening since the war started so suddenly, about 2 days after they left. It was simply to fulfill a promise that Naruto had made to the Kyuubi itself. When he had taken the Biju within him, he had promised to set him free far out west so that it could live free, and while he had set up to do that, he thought to do the same to the other 2 Biju he knew about who were sealed in Fu as well as Haku, since the further they were from a place that fought over them the better. So they all set out towards the west. There they saw many different things and met many different cultures of people as they did. The trip lasted a few months before they found the place the 3 Biju wanted to live in themselves. Once that was decided, Naruto used his abilities to separate them from their hosts, and thus they were now free to live their own lives. After a heartfelt goodbye for Fu, since her Biju had been with her most of her life, while the ones in Naruto and Haku had not even been sealed within them for a year. For them, there were simple nods of thanks before they all left to go their own separate ways. Getting back to the elemental countries was far easier to do than traveling away from it, since they had no idea what was waiting for them out there, yet they knew what they were coming back to, or at least they thought they did. It was when they got back that they had learned of the war that had taken place, one that lasted no more than a week and a half. Naruto had been surprised as he heard about what had happened, but even more so about who turned out to be the main hero of this war. Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto was speechless when he heard that, since he would have never guessed that in a million years. The guy was an asshole who didn't really seem like the type to sacrifice himself for others. But apparently he had. Nagato had been one of the main forces to stand toe-to-toe with Kaguya, but even then he struggled against her. It was Sasuke who won the fight for them all when he sacrificed himself as a living bomb of all things, that he rushed forward and blew himself up point blank. He had lost one of his arms entirely in the fighting, with the other one barely being usable as it was, so he had the one card to play in the end. This alone wasn't enough to kill her. but it gave Kakashi enough time to use his Kamiya close enough for Nagato to use one last Shinra Tensei that knocked her into it. This caused her body to disappear, but her head remained. They then went the overkill route and burned it until there was nothing left to make sure she was dead. That had been the end of the war, with Sasuke being a hero, given it was his sacrifice that gave them the opening they needed to kill Kaguya. And with Sasuke's death, so ended the Uchiha clan entirely. While he might have found a means to redeem himself in the eyes of the people due to his sacrifice in Naruto's books, he still won since he denied Sasuke the chance to continue his legacy as well as robbed him of all his funds before his end. And it wasn't just Sasuke's life that drastically changed like that. The others that Naruto took revenge against were all suffering the lasting effects of his actions. For Shino, well, he was thrown out of the clan since, as Naruto had made the poison, it was a very powerful insect repellent that made it, so he could no longer be around anyone in his own clan lest their own bugs die from being near his proximity. So Shino was thrown out in shame, and the usually level-headed and calm Shinobi's mind shattered to the point it never recovered. Several years later, after trying so hard to regain the strength he once had only to fail time and time again, he would hang himself in shame with a note left cursing Naruto for taking everything from him like this. Choji was cursed by the Pai Naruto had the witch hex for him. He was still a member of his clan to his dying day, which was only about 2 years after the end of the war. He thought that he could easily overcome whatever was happening to him by just eating more than normal, but that put him in a food-related comatose state. While in that state, the curse was still in full effect and so he died from it in the hospital. Ino. Well, that was easy enough to see. She was fucked for life. Naruto had Haku lobotomize her and there was no coming back from that. But the cherry on top of her condition was the fear-inducing drug that had been on those Senbon used to perform the procedure kept her in a permanent nightmare she could not wake up from. She cried out for someone to save her from the horrors of her mind, but no one came, and even when against all odds, it seemed like she had broken free and escaped one nightmare. It was just an illusion of her mind and the horrors began anew. And for the next 23 years she would remain this way in the hospital until her own mother and father died. With them dead, no one else in the clan cared enough to keep paying for her medical support, so they simply pulled the plug and she died in that bed. Only then did the nightmare cease once and for all. Hinata had lived for about 2 years, but after the first one, the poison Naruto had injected her with had finally taken effect and she began to grow weaker fast. She kept trying to train it off, but that didn't work at all, so she then went to the hospital, where she was told of the fact her muscles were degrading at a rate that was not normal. They couldn't heal her, but they told her that one man might, and thus she went to search for Naruto himself so as to get him to heal her. She made it to his office, but had to make an appointment since he was not there at the moment. Naruto saw her name in the appointment book and smirked as he knew what this was about, so he sent a message to Neji to come on over, which he did. So Naruto met with Hinata while Neji was in the back room, leaning against a wall away from view but still able to listen to their conversation. Hinata asked Naruto to heal her, but Naruto told her no. It was then her arrogance showed, and she actually demanded that he heal her. Naruto was having some serious deja vu here since she was acting like the kind family had when he first met them. But Naruto simply told her no and that she can go to hell. It was in her anger-fueled desperation that she ordered the branch members who came with her to attack, but they were easily subdued, since even with their eyes they didn't see the wires he had set up on the off chance this meeting went like this. Naruto had then smirked as he explained the situation to Hinata down to the last detail. He told her he had been the one to poison her, and told her exactly why he had done it. Her face was red with fury, but it all went white when Neji made himself known to her. She had been told he had been killed to harvest his organs to save her life, but apparently that was a lie, and what made the situation worse was the fact she could clearly see he no longer had the cage bird seal on his head, so she couldn't subdue him like before. What happened next? Naruto simply chalked it up as clan matters given Neji finally got his well-deserved revenge against his cousin, and since her body was too weak to take it she died in the end. It was never reported as such, though, since Naruto bought the silence of the security detail by simply eliminating the seal on them entirely. He had helped plenty of cursed people to the point he was fluent in extracting all but the most intense versions of them. So the branch members, or former ones he should say, left his office that day, and went to live their lives elsewhere. He never did look into where they went, but all he did know was that they never went back to Konoha, and Hinata's death was labeled as a missing nin attack, which worked well for him since no one was coming after him for vengeance. Out of all the clan heirs who still lived, Shikamaru was the only one who didn't get screwed over. Sure, his dad had died in the war, but he then took up the mantle that was left vacant by his father's death and grew less lazy for it. In the end, he began dating Gaara's older sister Tamari, which eventually led to them getting married and having a son. No one knew how those two got together in the first place given their extreme differences, but love was a strange thing at times. But now we get back to Naruto himself. So Naruto spent the next few weeks, once he returned from his journey out west, healing people of their wounds. Since there were plenty of them after the war was over and after things had settled down, he continued to do as he always had as the wandering doctor he had been known as. Kuretsuchi went back to Iwa to take over as Kage since her grandfather had died in the fighting, but she still made time for Naruto when he came to visit. A year later, Naruto officially married both Haku as well as Kuretsuchi, and a few weeks later they were confirmed pregnant with his child, as was one other person. The whole reason Naruto had agreed to becoming the patriarch of a newly formed clan was so as to be able to be with both Haku and Kuretsuchi without being judged negatively by the masses. Since he was the only male of a clan, a thing known as the Clan Restoration Act came into play that stated, said male could have multiple wives to grow the size of his clan, so they were no longer near extinction. But the issue of becoming an official clan was that you needed the backing of a daimyo of a major country. And there lies the problem, since the daimyos of the various countries would all but demand he settle down in their respective shinobi villages before they made his clan official. Yet luck had usually always been on Naruto's side, and so the answer to his dilemma had come in the form of the daimyo Koike herself. She was the daimyo of a major country, and he was already a citizen of it. And since they didn't have a shinobi village, he was still free to travel about like he had been doing. But then came the condition. Koike wanted a child, since she needed an heir to take the throne from her in the future, and she wanted it from one man alone. And to the disapproval of his two other lovers, it was Naruto she wanted a child with. At first both Haku and Kuretsuchi had been strict in their views, and told her no, but Koike had simply smirked, since she was the only daimyo who was willing to offer him clan status without the hidden strings forcing him to ally with one specific village. And since they could not argue with that, eventually they gave in. She didn't want to marry him. She just wanted a child out of the deal, which he gave her in the form of a daughter by the next year. Both Haku as well as Kuretsuchi both gave birth to children, with Haku giving birth to a son while the other was a girl. He loved all his children, and made sure to make time for them. For a few more years after their birth, he continued to travel to heal others, but then he decided to use his funds to make a school and began to train others to become the best medics they possibly could be. And from far and wide the people would come and learn from him this way. And over the years, those who graduated from his class became well known for their medical skills all over. His daughter, the one born from Kuretsuchi, who he named Mocha after his mother, had wanted to become a kunoichi like her mother was, which he had no arguments with, as well as his son, whom he named Zabuza out of respect for the man who had died along with Mei in the war. The daughter he had with Koike had, of course, been groomed to become the new daimyo of Spring, so that was not a surprise in the slightest. Over the years, he observed his children to make sure they were fine given his mixed genetics, and surprisingly they were stronger for it. The various bloodlines he had spliced into his genetic code, so as to use them, had been passed down to all three of them, but there were two expectations to that. He would have said three, but the ability he got from the devil fruit was not genetic, so there was no means to pass that along. The first was his blood-bending abilities. This had been a bit surprising, since he had always wondered what would happen there, but once he learned they did not have the same ability to use their blood like he could, he looked into the matter personally. What he found was a bit surprising. The blood he had been injected with all those years ago was parasitic in nature. Apparently what it did was drain the host dry and then wait to infect the next target, whatever it might be. Naruto had no way to know this for certain, but he guessed it was Faust's blood that had somehow made his body strong enough to control the parasitic blood instead of it killing him. Apparently, until he was dead, it was under his control. So he made sure to store some of his own blood for the future and froze it deep in the freezer within a special container, so it would not go bad. The second ability they could not use was the summoning of the doorway to his private operating room. That one he had no answer to, since the fact he could do it in the first place already defied logic, and he had no means to figure that out from a scientific standpoint. So he just chalked it up to bad luck. But while his children might not have those abilities, they still had the multiple other bloodlines he had spliced into his genes, and they each even had a Sharingan to call their own. But the thing that was weird about it was that theirs were blue, not red like the original. He always made sure to ensure his children's safety, given there would be plenty of people who would love to get their hands on a person with multiple bloodlines within them, and he would be damned if he didn't stop their attempts at the source itself. And like he feared, there were a few attempts, but in the end, he reminded those who dared to try and harm his family why he had earned the title Surgeon of Death. For so long he lived, with Koike dying at the age of 87 and Kuretsuchi at the age of 93. Naruto's genetics though kept him in relatively fine shape until the end, and the same went for Haku as well. Apparently, the bloodline that ran through her genetics slowed down the aging process even more than he did. He happily saw his family grow in time and do great things in the world along with the numerous people he had taught to the best of their skills. But while that was all good, none of them popped out as worthy of passing on the true source of his power to, since none of them really wanted to be a doctor like he was in his prime. But near the end of his life, that changed when he met his great-great-grandson named Naruto after himself. The boy would sit there and listen to his stories of the past and the adventures he had been on himself. He saw that spark in the boy's eyes that showed he was truly interested in becoming a doctor like he himself had been in his prime, and so for his last remaining few years, he taught little Naruto as much as he could, which, while not everything, was still quite a lot. But eventually he felt as his end was near, and as he laid down on his deathbed, his wife Haku by his side, he held onto a chest that contained the numerous journals he had kept his entire life, with all the things he had experimented with, as well as two other things. One was a simple apple, and while that might seem strange to put in there, what Naruto had learned from Law's journal was that when a devil fruit user died, the power transferred itself into the nearest fruit and transformed it into the foul-tasting source of power that Naruto himself had eaten when he was only 7. The irony here was that his great-great-grandson was 7 as well, and while he was there himself, the rest of his family were elsewhere. It was not out of hatred. It was because they were too far to get to him in time to see him in his final moments. The last thing Naruto did before he breathed his last was pull out his hat, the very one he had made as well as kept in pristine condition for most of his life, and placed it on the younger Naruto's head. "Through you, the Surgeon of Death lives on." Those had been his final words, but he died with a smile on his face. Haku cried at the loss of her husband as she took the chest from his hands and then used her bloodline to paralyze the young man. It was the final request of her husband, and while it was strange, she would do as he asked since he was not one to ever hurt his family, so she trusted there was a reason for this. She opened the container that Naruto had stored his blood in a syringe and injected it into the young man. The blood seeped into his system, and like it had done so long ago, it strengthened the boy with power unique to him alone, now with access to the blood-bending abilities as well as access to the interdimensional operating room. Naruto took the chest given to him with a heavy heart as he felt his body change, but he then went to his room and opened up the letter that was on top of it. The letter explained everything in detail about the contents of the chest as well as what he had his wife inject into him. Naruto had cried as he saw his elder entrust him with such power and saw the key taped to the letter. With it he opened up the chest and saw the strange fruit within. He took a deep breath, since the letter stated it was foul, tasting the likes words could not possibly describe, and then consumed it. The older Naruto had not lied about the taste, but he powered through it and ate the whole foul thing until there was nothing left. And in a repeat of history, the young man felt queasy and passed out as the devil fruit changed another user. In the morning, Naruto woke up and looked further into the chest that had been left for him. Within it he saw all the journals he had kept, and on the bottom of it were his cane as well as the gloves he used to wear with the wires still attached and strong. Naruto picked these items up and walked out the back door to practice his newfound power. He cried a bit as he held onto the hat he was gifted with, since the history that was infused into this one article of clothing was priceless, but in the end, he put it on his head and wiped the tears from his eyes since he had been the one chosen to carry on with his elder's legacy. Haku saw him through the back window as she prepared breakfast for the young boy, and she couldn't help but see the younger version of her husband in him as he smiled there and twirled his newly acquired cane like the now deceased Naruto had done so many times in the past. This caused Haku's eyes to tear up. The Surgeon of Death's legacy lived on. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video, as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlist. Hope you would like them too.